In a world where strength and talent were revealed through marks, the more wings a mark had, the more extraordinary its owner's power became. That boy bore a seven-winged mark, a power likened to the authority of the gods. Because of that, greedy men came after him, hunting him without end. When he was only a newborn infant, he had to crawl across the freezing snowy mountains in search of a path to survival. Fortunately, he was saved by a family and taken in to be raised. For the first time, Aster had a home in the truest sense, completely unlike his twisted previous life. At that moment, amid the cold battlefield shrouded in the shadows of the dead, Roderick stood stunned when he saw Aster appear. That man demanded, "I entrusted you with command of the army suppressing the East, so why are you here?" Only silence answered him. Then Aster declared in an icy voice that he had come here to kill him. From the very beginning, he had known Roderick intended to turn his unit into bait, then discard it once it had outlived its usefulness. Since that man had been so heartless, he should not blame him for having no affection left. Looking at the adoptive father before him, Aster called out in pain, "Father." But Roderick only sneered coldly. "That is the fate of the wingless, is it not, my foolish son?" He was Aster A. Elmheim, a member of that clan. Elmheim was the most renowned martial clan of the Six Palaces, swordsmen who used their blades to protect the royal family. Clan head Roderick was the only person in the kingdom who held the power of seven wings. It was he who had once saved Aster's life by chance when he nearly lost his life in a violent snowstorm. To repay the debt of having his life saved, Aster risked everything to do whatever Roderick demanded and became a true warrior. Yet Dallas and the other younger siblings always mocked him, forcing Aster to remember his place. "Aster, do not dream of having a place here, because you are merely someone without wings." In this world, a winged crest was proof of magical power. The more wings one had, the greater the magical power. But Aster was the only person in the clan completely unable to use magic. Though he was looked down upon, he still trained with the sword obsessively, almost to the point of madness. He believed that one day his loyalty would be properly rewarded. He would make them open their eyes wide in regret for ever looking down on him. Amid the boundless white snow, Aster realized in shock that he had fallen into an inescapable trap. Watching the figures gradually tighten their encirclement, he was aghast. "Why, is this an ambush?" Turning his bitter gaze toward the adoptive father he had once respected, he shouted, "Father, I trusted and followed you for so many years." In return for that devotion, there was only Roderick's cold gaze. That man said calmly, "Does a tool have the right to expectations?" Aster could not accept that cruel truth. He charged forward madly with his sword in hand, shouting in belated regret, "I was truly foolish to have ever placed my faith in you." Roderick only curled his lips cruelly, cursed him as pitiful, then struck with ease and sent him flying. Roderick wore an ice-cold smile as the others immediately launched blazing red strands of magic, binding Aster tightly. Just like that, he was brought down by them without being able to fight back. Standing before the dying Aster, a clan member continued to mock him. "Brother-in-law still does not understand. A wingless man belongs crawling on the ground like this." With his final breaths, Aster gathered the last of his strength to ask about the false kindness from years ago. "If you intended to discard me from the start, why did you save me?" Roderick knelt down, looking at him with lifeless eyes. Roderick grabbed Aster by the hair and coldly revealed a brutal truth. "What we need is the seven-winged power hidden deep inside you." In unbearable pain, Aster blurted out in shock, "7 wings." Roderick kept rubbing salt into his heart. "Your mother was quite useful, because that woman carried the seed that served my purpose." After saying that, he calmly turned his back, leaving Aster to gasp for breath on the blood-stained cold snow. With the last of his strength, Aster tried to reach out toward that retreating back. "Wait, what did you just say?" he tried to ask through broken breaths. Shouted in despair, "Answer me, Roderick." As his consciousness gradually fell apart, the bone-piercing cold swallowed his body, leaving him only able to whisper, "So cold." Dying like this was far too unjust. As his eyes dimmed, Aster bitterly wondered, "Is this where I die? Then what exactly did I live for?" Amid the vast whiteness, a vague warmth enveloped him. He wondered in bewilderment, "Is this the afterlife?" Suddenly realizing snow was falling on his face, he murmured, "Snow. No, this is reality." Aster jolted awake and realized, "I am still lying beneath the snowy sky, but in a completely different body." Looking at his tiny hands, he wondered in shock, "Where am I? Does this small body truly belong to me?" He realized he was in the body of a newborn child. Aster froze, thinking to himself, "Impossible, this was clearly the body of an infant." He lay in the ice-cold arms of a woman who had breathed her last amid the white snow. Could he truly have gone back in time? From afar, the pounding of hooves and the blazing torchlight tore through the night. The soldiers shouted. They had to find that woman at all costs. The commander at the front urged the soldiers on. For Lord Roderick's honor, they had to find the child she had kidnapped. Hearing the familiar name, Aster went rigid. They had just mentioned Roderick. That man was searching for a child. Could it be him? He suddenly remembered the story he had once heard about being abandoned on that stormy, snowy night. The truth was so shocking that it left him reeling. Impossible. Could he have returned to the past? No matter how absurd and unbelievable everything was, Aster knew he had to act immediately. He hurriedly looked at the corpse of the woman lying beside him. He made up his mind. If he stayed here, he would fall into the Duke's hands again. He had to escape, as far away as possible. The newborn child began gathering what little strength he had left. He struggled to crawl across the freezing snow, trying to escape the pursuit behind him. The bone-piercing cold and his frail young body gradually drained Aster of strength. Damn it. He could barely breathe, his limbs numb and freezing as if they were about to lose all feeling. Even if he had to crawl miserably through the cold night, the flame of revenge still burned bright in his amber gold eyes. Thinking of the enemies back in his mind, he clenched his teeth and swore bitterly. Roderick, I will survive. With this tiny body, living alone was already hard, let alone taking revenge. The long trail he had crawled across the snow finally stopped when Aster had exhausted all his strength. The next morning, a little girl found him lying on the ice, barely breathing. Father, come here quickly. Soon after, a man with the bearing of a noble hurried over. He was the Viscount of the Hyfried family. Seeing a newborn child lying all alone in the snowstorm, he exclaimed in astonishment, "What is this?" Viscount Hyfried gently lifted the child, wondering in shock why a baby would appear in such a place. Seeing the long trail across the snow, he was even more stunned. Questions surged through the Viscount's mind. Could a baby have gone so far? Just who was this child? The child's extraordinary vitality left Hyfried both shaken and unable to suppress his curiosity. He held the tiny life in his arms and shielded him from the cold with his warm cloak, while Aster slowly sank into a deep sleep, so he could safely sleep a little longer. In the endless void, Aster wondered in confusion. Where was he? He saw the image of a newborn child wrapped in light and feathers. He thought to himself, this child? Immediately after that, a blow straight to the face woke him up. As soon as he opened his eyes, Aster saw a group of children surrounding the girl and cheering. Sister, this little one is awake. As tiny hands poked and prodded him, he heard another little girl warn them. Stop messing around, you will break his cute little nose. Feeling extremely annoyed, he irritably wondered what on earth was going on. Unable to bear it any longer, Aster sprang up and dashed away, making the children behind him cry out in alarm. Aster ran wildly down the corridor, his mind in chaos. Damn it, what on earth was happening? Behind him, the children were still chasing after him and shouting loudly, "Hey, stop right there." In his panic at being cornered, Aster roared, "Why do you people keep chasing me?" He unconsciously released a stream of golden aura. In the blink of an eye, his body lost control of its mana and shot up into the air. Even he himself was stunned by it, but the problem now was how he was supposed to get down. This was a total disaster. Fortunately, the Viscount caught him in his arms in time. Looking at the baby in his hands, he said in astonishment, "This time he fell from the sky. He truly is a mysterious child." Aster was stunned when he recognized the face of the man before him, Viscount Hyfried of Lodric territory. He wondered suspiciously whether this was another branch of the Elmheim family. Hyfried mu Elmheim was the head of the Viscount line, a branch subordinate to the prestigious Elmheim family. He and his younger brother Roderick had once become two warriors entrusted with the heavy duty of protecting the imperial family. But in Aster's memories, this Viscount had long since died in the civil war that brought the entire family into decline. Seeing a man who had died now standing right before him, Aster became completely certain. He had confirmed it, he truly had returned to the past. How ironic, after escaping the mansion of that cruel duke, he had been saved by that man's own older brother. The noblewoman gently took Aster into her arms and asked in surprise, "So the baby's magic went out of control, and that was why he flew like that?" Hyfried nodded. "Yes, I thought he was only an ordinary infant." Looking at the trembling child, she gently adjusted his cloak. "You must have been so scared. It is all right now." After saying that, she tenderly held him in her arms. "Why must such a tiny child suffer like this already? I feel there is something wrong about this." While Aster was still dazed, Hyfried observed him thoughtfully and realized that this child possessed astonishing power. He stepped closer, firmly rolled up Aster's sleeve, then declared. He pulled up his clothes and immediately reached a conclusion. Everyone fell silent when they saw the mark on the baby's back. The woman blurted out in shock what was going on, while the Viscount could not hide his astonishment either. 7 wings. Looking at that blazing red mark, Aster froze and wondered, why had it appeared on me? Painful memories from his previous life suddenly surged back like a nightmare, along with Roderick's cruel declaration about the power of 7 wings. So from the very first moment, that man's so-called salvation had been nothing but a vicious scheme. He had picked him up like an object, only to wait for the chance to seize all his power. That truth made Aster seethe with hatred. So he brought me back only to take these 7 wings. What does wingless mean? After you tore those wings apart yourself, you still dared say that. Seeing the child in his arms turn pale, Hyfried's wife anxiously asked her husband how he intended to handle this. That was right. Would he be like that younger brother and find a way to harm him too? Aster silently cried that this was bad, his tiny hands clenching tight as if he had made up his mind. I absolutely cannot let this power fall into the hands of the Elmheim family. I needed to take revenge on him. But contrary to his fear, Viscount Hyfried made a firm decision. Let us adopt this child. He gently placed a hand on Aster's head and softly comforted that little child. He is still only a fledgling that cannot fly on his own. Until his wings are fully grown, I will take responsibility for caring for him. Right in the middle of that solemn atmosphere, the room door suddenly burst open, sending the children who had been secretly listening outside tumbling in. Hyfried calmly looked at his children piled on top of one another and asked, "You all heard clearly, did you not?" Viscountess Hayfried looked at the children gathered around her and gave a soft sigh. "Yes, I am truly worried about that child too." In the warm room, the orange-haired girl tugged at her mother's hand and curiously asked the younger child's name. The whole family seemed ready to welcome its newest member. Looking at the obedient child lying in her arms, the woman smiled kindly and softly called Aster. That was the name of the star newly born into our family, like a blessing for the child with those special amber golden eyes. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye, and the scene shifted to a magnificent castle where rows of servants stood neatly in line. They bowed respectfully when the familiar figure appeared. "We have been waiting for you, Viscount Hyfried." Stepping out through the door was a young man with a calm and mature bearing. At his waist hung a long sword, and he was Aster after 10 years of relentless training. He thoughtfully reached out to support his older sister and reminded her softly, "Sister Anfin, please be careful." Anfin smiled brightly and trustingly took her younger brother's hand. Thank you, Aster." The whole family was attending the Sword Dance Assembly, a major annual event hosted by a ducal family under Elm Hen. This was not only an occasion for martial nobles to socialize, but also a place where each family displayed and probed the strength of its swordsmen. Under Hyfried's lead, Aster and Anfin entered the main hall, where every gaze fell upon the young talents. Those wealthy nobles loved flaunting their power and always acted as if they were rolling in money. The Viscount's party instantly became the subject of malicious whispers. Has the Viscount's family come to make a laughingstock of itself again? Amid those contemptuous stares, Aster silently listened to the insults. They said he was a child of unknown origin adopted in place of the heir. Seeing Aster remain silent among the surrounding shadows, Anfin worriedly comforted him, "Do not take it to heart." Even so, the pressure from those who held power still pressed heavily upon the shoulders of the powerless. Viscount Hyfried taught in a low voice, "The weak will be crushed here." He led Aster to stand before the castle that had once haunted him. "I want you to see this with your own eyes. Are you disappointed?" Contrary to his father's concern, Aster raised his head high. His eyes blazed with pride. "No, father, I do not find this coldness worth fearing." That firm answer made Hyfried burst into a hearty laugh. "Hearing you say that puts me at ease as well." Gazing deep into the castle, Aster silently thought to himself, "In my previous life, I entered society as a stain on the Elmham family. This place holds far too many bitter memories. This time I have returned with the 7-winged emblem." He had come back and was clearly far more formidable than before. From the high balcony, Dallas and the other arrogant ones narrowed their eyes. They watched the child from back then, now grown. Aster clearly sensed those hostile gazes, but he did not waver at all. He strode proudly beside his father and older sister, a complete plan already burning in his heart. His gaze was sharp as a blade as he silently declared, "Now first let us create a truly dazzling debut." In an age when knights stood at the pinnacle, their strength was measured by their swordsmanship. It was the absolute peak of swordsmanship, where each stroke of the sword divided the boundary between strong and weak. And prestige was immortal renown, the ultimate symbol every swordsman longed to reach. In the arena, streams of power. Brilliant blue light shone from the youth's hands, flaring with imposing force. They formed powerful slashes, leaving opponents no time to defend before collapsing under overwhelming strength. The essence of that power and prestige was none other than the emblem. Aster looked at the radiant 2-winged symbol on the winner's hand. From the high balcony, Aster quietly observed beside his father and Anfin, feeling that the overwhelming pressure here was still exactly as it had been before. Looking at the arena stretched taut with tension, he silently thought, "No wonder Furin and Frey did not want to come. Even a coward like me is afraid of direct combat." He recalled the memories of once being scorned by the powerful and noble. The humiliation he suffered in this place still etched even now. Seeing Aster silent with a contemplative expression, Anfin worriedly called her younger brother's name and asked softly, "Aster, are you trembling?" It was easy to understand, after all, this was her first sword dance festival. And yet Aster merely curled his lips, his eyes showing clear contempt as he looked at the chaos below. "Not exactly, I just feel a little uncomfortable." More precisely, this scene was truly sickening. Viscount Hyfried said he had a meeting and had to leave for a while telling Aster to watch over Anfin carefully. His older sister immediately protested. "Father, honestly, I am 1 year older than Aster." The only answer was her younger brother's teasing gaze, as if saying it was because she was too clumsy. Before leaving, Hyfried patted Aster on the shoulder and advised him to take this chance to socialize and befriend people his own age. He leaned close to his son's ear and quietly reminded him with hidden meaning that all he had to do was not reveal the 7 wings. Aster watched his father's back and thought to himself that it was much easier said than done. Sensing countless blazing red, malicious gazes surrounding him from behind, he only scratched his head in exasperation. But how was he supposed to socialize in an atmosphere so full of hatred like this? They would not even give him a chance. Those narrow-minded people, dealing with them was worse than going back to sleep. Suddenly a cold light flashed in his eyes. Seeing Aster stride away decisively, Enfin called after him in panic. "Aster, where are you going?" He only looked back and answered in a mysterious voice, "I am going to make friends." He walked straight toward the waiting hall, where the arrogant laughter of the nobles still rang without end. Seeing a stranger block his view, Dallas frowned, set down his glass, and growled, "Who the hell are you?" Aster kept his calm smile and bowed in greeting. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Brother Dallas. I am Aster F. Elmheim, your cousin." He said calmly that he had seen his older brother from afar, so he wanted to come over and offer a greeting. Immediately, Gurion, who was sitting beside him, spoke in a mocking voice. "He is the adopted child the Viscount's family picked up." Hearing that, Dallas burst into arrogant laughter. He raised a hand to his forehead and insulted him. "No wonder you really are shameless for daring to carry the letter F in your name." Looking at Dallas and Gurion, the 2 official heirs of the Elmheim family, Aster coldly realized that they were the very ones who had harmed him in his previous life. "Even if you have changed, I still recognize you." Looking at the people before him, Aster secretly found it ridiculous that he had once trembled in fear before such ordinary people. Now, in his eyes, they were no different from children putting on a show. "Enough, go back, I have asked enough." But Dallas called Aster back in time. "Oh, Enfin, you are here too." He saw Enfin trembling in fear. He continued to jeer. "Do not tell me you are still hiding behind your father. Why not come over and serve us? This is an order from the main family." Enfin stepped forward decisively, holding on to her dignity. "I refuse. There is no master-servant relationship between the main family and the branch family." She firmly took Aster's hand and pulled him away from there. Yet that man still shouted, "I have not finished speaking." He twisted his lips into a crooked smile. "You know, this girl's father is such a cowardly knight that he could not even protect the king. That was why he had to admit his crime, then had his arm cut off by his own brother." Dallas deliberately added another vicious line. "Fortunately, I do not carry the blood of a failure like you." Unable to endure it any longer, Enfin burst into tears and shouted in resentment, "Enough, take back your words right now. You are not allowed to insult my father." At once, Dallas splashed his glass of wine straight onto her and coldly insulted her. "Giving birth only to useless daughters, with no one able to inherit the title. Your father must be very disappointed. You bastard, if there were no women, where would you have crawled out from? Daring to look down on others like that. If you were my child, I would deal with you to the end." Looking at Enfin trembling in her luxurious dress that was now soaked, Dallas sneered venomously. "This is not a ball. Next time you should come in rags, so it will be less of a pity when they get dirty." Witnessing that scene, Aster quietly stepped closer, his eyes darkening. At that moment, only one thought remained in his mind. At first, I was worried. He had worried that he would no longer feel rage when he met them again. But fortunately, their violence had rekindled the flame of hatred within him. He casually borrowed a bottle of wine from someone standing nearby. Aster gently placed his hand on Anfin's shoulder to reassure her, then called out coldly, "Alice." He tossed the wine bottle into the air, leaving everyone stunned. The sword was drawn from its sheath as fast as lightning. A slash flashed past, sending wine splashing all over them. Splashed by the wine without warning, Dallas shouted in shock, while the subordinates around him frantically called for their young master. Amid that chaos, Aster remained terrifyingly calm. He casually wiped the streak of wine from his lips. His eyes blazed brightly, full of menace. "Oh, it is only grape juice. It suits stinking nobles like you very well." The horrific memory from 3 years ago suddenly surged back when Aster's power first erupted beyond control. Amid the radiant golden energy that burned everything, a desperate cry rang out, "Stop it, Aster." Witnessing that terrifying sight, the little girl Furin held her fading sister and sobbed, "Are you going to kill her? Wake up quickly." Before the dazzling halo that concealed destructive power, Viscount Hyfried could not help being shocked. "So this is the 7 wings. I never thought it would be this dangerous." He tightened his grip on the sword hilt, wondering whether a child could control such divine power, because if he could not suppress it, it would devour both Aster and those around him. That power was like a wild beast that could not yet distinguish friend from foe, capable of harming anyone it encountered. Back in the present, right after Aster's provocative act of splashing wine, a soldier rushed into the meeting room of the great nobles in panic and shouted, "Master, something serious has happened." Hyfried, who was discussing important matters with Roderick, immediately frowned in displeasure. "What is it?" "We are in the middle of an important meeting," the soldier reported while trembling. "The people from the Elmheim main family and branch family are causing trouble. Their 2 young masters are about to clash in a sword duel." What? Both Hyfried and Roderick were stunned. Everyone froze at the shocking news that had just crashed down on them. Without a moment of hesitation, the Viscount immediately quickly rushed straight toward the main hall. The moment she saw her father, Anfin ran over in panic and called out. He hurriedly asked at once, "Anfin, what exactly is happening here?" She trembled as she pointed toward the chaotic crowd, where Aster and Dallas were locked in a fierce confrontation. Below in the main hall, people began whispering about the rare sight of brothers turning on each other within the prestigious Elmheim family. A strange hat-wearing man with glowing red eyes watched while sneering that this sword dance festival was truly interesting. Dallas frantically poured in mana, making his sword blaze red with deadly light. He laughed arrogantly, mocking Aster as nothing but a wandering stray dog who understood nothing of the gap in power. Right after that, the four-wing crest on Dallas's hand flared to life. The sight left the spectators unable to hide their astonishment at the superior caliber of a duke's disciple. He pointed his sword at Aster and provoked him. "Come on, show me your wing crest, or are you ashamed after seeing mine?" In the face of that provocation, Aster remained terrifyingly calm. He replied with contempt that proudly showing off those meaningless patterns was the truly shameful thing, something he would never do. Those words struck Dallas's pride, making his face turn purple with rage, his eyes bulging in fury. Aster coldly stated his condition: "If I win, you must apologize to her." Dallas sneered and agreed, but also set a cruel price: "If I win, you will be my hunting dog until you die." Without delaying any longer, Dallas roared with murderous intent and charged straight into attack. He swung his sword again and again, unleashing decisive slashes as if he meant to bring his opponent down instantly. Yet Aster glided away lightly, as agile as a phantom. He easily neutralized every powerful slash from his opponent. The shrill clash of metal rang throughout the hall as Aster calmly blocked the vicious strike. To him, these little tricks were no different from child's play. Dallas roared, swinging his magic blazing sword and shouting for him to behold the power of a four-wing crest. The frenzied slashes formed a terrifying pressure, leaving Anfin able only to call out anxiously, "Aster." Although Dallas's swordsmanship was still considered immature, the overwhelming mana from his four-wing crest covered every flaw. That was the absolute advantage of one who bore a wing crest, crushing all technique with pure magic. If the mana of one wing only flickered like a candle in the wind, then four wings erupted with frightening intensity. Dallas attacked madly while laughing in ridicule. "Where did that arrogance of yours from earlier go? Did you not want me to apologize? Or was that only empty talk?" He continued to press in, shouted, forcing Aster to reveal his true strength. Seeing the battle tilt completely to one side, the surrounding crowd smugly assumed the outcome was already clear. Aster answered in an icy voice, "You talk too much." In the very next instant, he twisted his body, broke through the offensive, and closed in at a dizzying speed. Dallas only had time to gasp in shock. "What?" Aster answered coldly. "Do you understand manners now? Next time, talk less and do more." A brilliant surge of golden magic suddenly erupted, enveloping Aster's entire body with terrifying power. The pressure was completely overwhelming. He spoke in a low voice about 10 years of harsh training in the Viscount's family. All of it had been for the day he could take revenge on those who had once trampled him underfoot. Aster swung his sword, creating brilliant golden arcs, ready to crush the enemy before him. The radiant golden men around Aster erupted violently. It forced Dallas into a corner, leaving him almost able only to tremble and speak in panic. Witnessing that unbelievable scene, Gurion cried out to his older brother in shock. Dallas gritted his teeth in resentment, unable to accept that he was being pushed back. "Why? I have a four-wing crest." Contrary to his panic, Aster remained cold, his eyes blazing with intense pressure. The nobles below began stirring in terror, unable to believe Dallas could possibly lose. They were stunned to realize that Dallas was being completely overwhelmed, and their hearts could not help but tremble. Did Elmheim still have such a monster in its ranks? While Aster was attacking relentlessly, Viscount Hyfried, standing on the balcony, suddenly noticed something abnormal. He spoke in a worried, grave voice. "This is bad." Dallas tried to resist in despair, his face twisting under the horrific pressure of magic. Painful memories of betrayal and mocking laughter from his previous life suddenly flooded back. They burned Aster's mind with the fierce flames of hatred. His extreme fury made the mana within him surge like a storm, as if it wanted to crush the trembling man before him. Before that suffocating killing intent, Dallas could only beg in a shaking voice, "Stop." Everyone watched as the scene was about to spiral out of control. Creed shouted in panic, "No, Aster." A thunderous impact rang out, and the match ended in stunned silence. It turned out he had only driven his sword into the ground. Otherwise, that distinguished man would have paid a heavy price. Even so, that strike was enough to frighten him so badly that he lost all face. Aster coldly threw the earlier insult back at him. "Next time, remember to wear rags underneath, so it hurts less when you get soaked, dear cousin. A gentleman's revenge is never too late, even after 10 years. Aster lifted his head proudly and looked up toward the balcony, where his gaze was fixed. Anfin was still watching his every movement with worry. In his heart, he told himself that he was no longer the nameless, wingless Aster. The sense of freedom and power made his mind clearer than ever before. However, a dense wave of killing intent suddenly swept over him, making his pupils contract. Startled, Aster whipped around, his breathing ragged as he sensed an extremely terrifying presence. It was, from above the staircase, a heavy pressure spread downward, making the air seem to freeze. It was Roderick. Aster clenched his teeth, his eyes burning with hatred as he faced the monster who had ruined his life. After so many years, that devil was finally standing before him. Aster wondered what he should do next. The entire gallery held its breath. Whispers rose, then were quickly swallowed by fear, for the honor of the main family had been trampled. Aster walked on in silence, his cold, sharp gaze sweeping over Dallas, who lay on the ground and laughed like a madman. Then he lifted his eyes to the towering figure at the top of the stairs, Roderick, the 8th Patriarch of Elmheim. Aster did not avoid that gaze at all. Seeing his father appear, Dallas seemed to find something to rely on and crawled miserably across the floor. He stammered his accusation. It was him. This piece of trash dared to oppose our main family. Dallas kept stirring up his father's anger in a vile voice, begging him to use his authority to teach her a lesson. Yet before he could finish speaking, Roderick coldly swung the sword in his hand. A blow fell like thunder onto Dallas's pleading hand, plunging the entire scene into horror. Dallas's cry of agony immediately rang out, shrill and piercing. That sound echoed through the hall, leaving the crowd frozen in terror. Roderick looked at his defeated son with utter contempt, coldly scolding him for disgracing the entire family. Seeing Roderick's fury, Viscount Hyfred shouted in panic, "Roderick, stop, do not do this." Ignoring the attempt to stop him, Roderick roared that one unworthy of holding a sword deserved punishment. At the very instant the merciless blade was about to fall, Aster charged forward as fast as a bolt of lightning. Aster blocked the tip of Roderick's sword, calmly reminding him that Dallas had not yet apologized to Sister Anfin as promised. Faced with such arrogance, Roderick asked with contempt, "An orphan adopted by Hyfried actually thinks he is in Elmheim." Aster replied without flinching that he was the Viscount's son, and had learned from his father the pride and responsibility of a knight. The space suddenly fell silent before Roderick's frightening stillness. That man radiated crimson killing intent, using his status as the main family and the title of the King's Sword to suppress her. Seeing the situation escalate, all the surrounding nobles understood that matters had become serious. This was no longer a simple quarrel between children. Roderick continued using the painful past to threaten him, reminding him that Aster's father had once lost an arm for disloyalty. He pressed his sword down hard and questioned what Aster intended to sacrifice, plainly using his status to overpower a child. Beneath the mountain-like pressure, Aster remained strangely calm. He answered in a ringing voice that this was an official duel, and that he had only answered an insult to the Viscount's house with his sword. Aster looked straight at his enemy, turning that man's own reasoning back against him. "One who cannot defend himself is unworthy of holding a sword. Was that not your own words, uncle? I will not sacrifice even a single finger." While Anfin still trembled with worry, the onlookers grew even more stunned when learned Aster's true age. He was only 10 years old. It was hard to believe. Roderick merely stared silently at the child before him with bloodshot eyes that were impossible to read. Roderick coldly said he understood, then immediately gave an order. "Then take your stance. Immediately." A terrifying pressure came crashing down, leaving Aster shocked and unable to react in time. Roderick slashed out with a blow as swift as light, dragging forth an earth-shaking explosion of magic. The strike crushed the hard stone floor into countless fragments, horrifying everyone that the old man had attacked a child. Witnessing that sight, Anfin could only cover her face and burst into tears of despair. Viscount Hyfried roared in fury, "Roderick." Then he immediately threw himself into the midst of the fight, swung his sword, and stopped the Patriarch's brutal strike by a hair, creating a fiery confrontation between the two brothers. The aftershock of the collision made the air suffocating, and Hyfried immediately shouted. He called his son's name in extreme worry. "Aster, are you hurt?" Amid the thick cloud of dust and the collapsed stone pillars, the boy's figure gradually emerged. Though gravely injured, Aster still stood firm with his sword in hand. His eyes blazed with unyielding will, his blood-stained face revealing boundless hatred. Roderick silently observed that child for a long while, his face revealing not the slightest emotion. After that he calmly turned his back and left, leaving Dallas lying miserably on the ruined ground. Watching Roderick's back gradually disappear, Aster also ran out of strength and collapsed under his father's panicked gaze. Hyfried hurriedly caught his son's swaying body, anxiously calling out Aster. Though his face was stained with blood, he still smiled in satisfaction and whispered that he had protected his sister, his father, and his promise. Looking at that resilient child, Hyfried replied through a choked voice, "Yes, you did well." On the other side, Roderick silently descended the stairs, ignoring Dallas, who had fallen beneath countless scrutinizing eyes. After witnessing everything, a noble wearing a hat spoke in mockery. "You are rather heavy-handed with children, Roderick." That man believed that if Aster had been allowed to act unchecked, the main family's honor would have shattered, so that strike was a compromise. Every gaze turned once more toward the boy who had just caused such an upheaval. He silently thought this was truly the most shocking debut in noble society, daring to confront even the Grand Duke head-on. The noble accompanying him trembled and broke out in cold sweat, nearly having a heart attack from fear that the Elmham family would split apart after this this battle. Roderick sank into thought, his eyes blazing red like fire. He sensed an age of chaos approaching, a storm powerful enough to tear the world into pieces. Lo, Anfinn hurried over in panic to check Aster's wounds, while Hyfried still supported him. Though covered in injuries, Aster still smiled brightly at his father and older sister. The sound of wooden swords clashing rang across the training yard. Then Aster easily defeated his opponent with a single decisive strike. Lying flat on the ground, the soldier could only say in admiration, "Truly impressive, young Master Aster." The remarkable progress of the 10-year-old boy quickly became a lively topic of discussion among the soldiers. The people around him whispered, "His skill is not bad at all. Only 10 years old, how frightening." He realized that ever since the sword dance festival, Aster seemed to have become a different person, throwing himself into training with astonishingly powerful motivation. News that he had defeated Roderick's third son spread quickly, leaving the Viscount branch family immensely satisfied after years of grievance under the main family. Aster thought to himself, at the sword dance festival, he had already displayed enough strength and authority. At the very least, he had made those who mocked the Viscount branch as Elmham's disgrace shut their mouths. The ambition in his heart had never stopped there. Aster's true goal was still the Elmham family, a place overflowing with injustice and oppression. He continued swinging his sword, constantly forcing himself far beyond his limits to test his true strength. His eyes blazed when he recalled his confrontation with Roderick. Aster admitted that at the time, he had still wanted to test himself further. Looking back at the wound from the previous battle, Aster bitterly understood that he currently could not defeat Roderick. A wing crest only measured magical potential, while true strength depended on one's ability to develop and control it. Aster poured all his strength into one powerful sword strike, secretly yearning in his heart. If only he could push the 7 wings to their limit without fearing his magic power would erupt out of control. But he was still only 10 years old. Swinging the wooden sword in his hand, he shouted with full vigor, "Next, does anyone else want to fight?" Witnessing that chaotic scene, Anfinn sighed softly in helplessness. Has it started again? Our Aster truly never knows how to hold back. It is unbelievable. She stepped closer and announced, "Ah, father is calling for you." Hearing that, Aster immediately sheathed his sword and replied, "Father is calling. I understand, I will go at once." Looking at his older sister, Aster was surprised by her neat training outfit. He remarked, "This outfit is rare to see. Did you not once complain it was ugly and hate wearing it?" Anfinn explained thoughtfully, "Everything needs balance, does it not? Looking at you, I have begun to think again. I cannot keep living the way I am forever." Suddenly, she pointed the wooden sword straight at her younger brother's face. She gave a challenging smile. "So when you come back, you have to spend plenty of time training with me." Faced with his older sister's coaxing, Aster could only laugh and wave his hand. "Haha, spare me." He left the training yard, where soldiers lay scattered after their bouts, and headed toward his father's study. Standing before the exquisitely carved wooden door, Aster politely knocked. "May I come in?" After stepping inside, he saw Viscount Hyfried standing deep in thought by the window. Aster asked respectfully, "Father, why did you call for me?" The Viscount turned around, his expression clearly grave. "Sit down." Seeing such a parental expression, it really was tense. Aster quietly sat down in the chair across from his father. Hyfried looked at his adopted son with eyes heavy with thought, then slowly began. "It has been nearly 10 years since the day we brought you home. Father originally intended to wait until you were a little more grown before telling you this." As he spoke, he placed a small cushion on the table. On it was a ring set with a glittering crimson stone. Aster exclaimed in shock, "This is..." Hyfried looked straight into his eyes and declared firmly, "This is proof of succession. Aster, father wants you to inherit the Viscount branch family." Viscount Hyfried's direct proposal left Aster unable to help being stunned. He explained that Aster himself clearly understood the Viscount branch family's current position was extremely precarious. Whether they wanted it or not, they were still a branch bearing the Elmham name, responsible for protecting their own territory, so they could not leave the succession position empty forever. Faced with that great decision, Aster asked anxiously, "Have my sisters agreed to this?" Hyfried said that when Aster went to the Knight Academy, he would meet his sisters and formally announce everything. Thinking of Sister Manhwa, and especially Sister Kudo, Aster silently guessed they would not be pleased. Kudo in particular would certainly be furious. Hyfried sighed and admitted that she hated him because he was a boy, and because he was fortunate enough to possess 7 wings. But did she know how much he had suffered? Aster stood up decisively and refused. "I cannot accept this." He said he was still far too immature, unable even to control his own magic power, and had nearly harmed his own older sister. Hyfried fell silent before the strange maturity of a child who was only 10 years old. Hyfried said thoughtfully, "You always make father worry and think deeply. Sometimes father truly does not know whether you are an ordinary child." He put the succession ring into its box, then opened another hidden drawer. "Father originally thought the ring would be your reward for the sword dance festival, but perhaps you will like this more." Aster blurted out in shock. That was the moment he saw the true gift lying inside. It was the magic sword Graham, the legendary sword capable of absorbing magic power, the only thing that could help him completely control the violent power of the 7 wings. Hayfried led Aster to a deserted forest, then nodded in satisfaction. Good, this place is very suitable. When Aster wondered why they were not using the training room, his father immediately brought up the times he had accidentally destroyed everything around him. As an explanation for this caution, he solemnly presented the sword that still rested in its sheath. The magic sword Graham is an heirloom treasure, meant for the eldest son of the Elmham clan head. Father had someone bring it here from the main mansion for you. Aster stood stunned as he saw it with his own eyes, looking at the treasured sword Graham, which in truth had no blade and was only a broken sword. Hayfried explained that it was a sword of potential, only completed when its master poured mana into it. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately demonstrated, channeling mana into it and making a crimson blade appear. The oddly shaped blade flared to life, radiating a terrifying pressure that left Aster horrified. Graham's destructive power created a devastating slash. In the blink of an eye, the ground was torn apart, and the dense forest ahead was crushed as well. Hayfried warned in a grave voice. However, if your mana is too weak, the sword itself may drain you dry. He held the hilt out toward his son and asked, "So, do you want to try?" Aster reached out with trembling hands to receive it. His mind was tangled with doubts about channeling mana into this ancient and dangerous weapon. The moment he touched the hilt, a blazing golden radiance suddenly erupted, enveloping Aster's entire body. He was stunned to realize that the mana in his body was being devoured madly by the sword, with no need for him to control it at all. A massive stream of energy from Graham shot straight into the sky, transforming into a dazzling pillar of light. That light immediately drew attention and shocked those watching from afar. Fortunately, Hayfried had foreseen this and brought him here, otherwise the entire village might have suffered disaster. One soldier panicked, thinking a meteor had fallen, but his comrade immediately denied it, because that light had clearly flown from the ground into the sky. Watching from afar, Enfin could not hide her worry. What on earth is that? It must be Aster's doing. At the center of the mana eruption, Aster stared at the weapon in his hand in amazement and inwardly sighed. This truly is an extraordinary sword. However, Viscount Hayfried looked at his son with a stern gaze and declared, "What is truly extraordinary is your power." He explained that throughout Elmheim's long history, no one had ever possessed the legendary 7-wing emblem. Looking at the violently swirling energy in the sky, Hayfried said with conviction that once he mastered this power, he would far surpass even his father, who bore the 6-wing emblem. He might even surpass Lord Roderick. Hearing the name of his enemy from his previous life, Aster clenched his hand, silently stoking his resolve to surpass that monster. Hayfried continued to issue a stern warning about the dark side of power, because overwhelming strength always tended to sow the seeds of conflict. He worried that if the secret of the 7 wings was exposed, Aster would become the center of jealousy and envy. There would be madmen who would desperately try to turn him into a tool to exploit. There would also be many who wanted to erase him as a threat that had to be eliminated. If you are weak, you are scorned. If you are stronger, you are hated. That saying was not wrong. He looked at his adopted son with deep concern. Therefore, when that time comes, so that you will not have to regret your own helplessness, come strong while you still can. Looking at the hand his father extended, Aster firmly took it, promising himself that he would never live as miserably as he had in his previous life again. He looked straight into Hayfried's eyes and said with resolve, "Thank you, father. I will definitely master both the 7 wings and this sword." 3 days later, his 2 older sisters returned to the mansion, where the Viscountess and Enfin were already waiting with radiant smiles. "Welcome home, my children." As soon as she stepped into the mansion, the girl with vivid orange hair and bold blue eyes loudly announced, "The useless Miss Ryabka has returned." Walking beside her was a silver-haired young lady who was far gentler and calmer. After a short dry cough, the orange-haired girl immediately corrected her posture. That was Kudo. She beamed brightly and spread her arms with enthusiasm. "Come now, my beloved little sisters, hurry and hug your big sister to celebrate our reunion." However, contrary to Kudo's enthusiasm, the 2 youngest sisters swept past her like the wind, throwing themselves straight into the silver-haired sister's arms and cheering, "Welcome home, Sister Manhwa." Cruelly abandoned, Kudo froze in shock. "Oh my what about a hug for Sister Kudo?" From afar, Viscount Hayfried, his wife, and Enfin could only watch the scene with awkward sympathy. Explaining that cold treatment, one little sister clung tightly to Manhwa and muttered, "But Sister Kudo always messes up my hair right away." Hearing that, Kudo crossed her arms in wounded pride, trying to maintain her image. "No way, how could someone like me, so thoroughly steeped in the spirit of knighthood, behave so improperly?" However, the moment she saw Enfin, Kudo's true nature surged back with full force. She immediately rushed over and hugged Enfin tightly, excitedly pinching the little girl's cheeks nonstop. "Were you a good girl at home?" Squeezed until she could barely breathe, Enfin could only ask weakly in helplessness, "Why did you run over here?" Just as the little girls had said, Kudo's hands began moving again, mercilessly ruffling Anfin's pink hair into a mess. Realizing the new family member was not there, Manhwa looked around and asked, "Where is Aster?" Standing beside his wife, Hyfrid replied, "Ah, if you want to find Aster then." As soon as she heard that name, Kudo's eyes instantly turned cold. It seemed this older sister had little affection for her adopted younger brother. Meanwhile, in a clearing deep within the forest, a crimson mana explosion had just swept through, flattening an entire area of ancient trees. Aster was still throwing himself into training like a madman. Sweat poured down and his breathing grew ragged. Huff huff. He clenched his teeth tensely as he felt his body become unstable. Damn it, this is bad. Looking at the blazing magic sword Gram in his hand, Aster wondered. He could create a sword with mana, but right now, simply controlling it was already his limit. Even though he had produced destructive power that split the ground apart, he still felt far too small before the goal ahead of him. How could he become as strong as father? Suddenly, a mocking voice rang out behind him. My, this time you really have exceeded expectations. Aster started and turned around, recognizing the sister who had just returned, standing with her arms crossed as she watched him. "Sister Kudo, you are back." Kudo leisurely walked closer, the smile on her lips carrying a trace of challenge. "I thought you could not even be bothered to welcome your older sister. Is that not a little cold?" She drew close, her eyes boring into Aster with scrutiny. "Or do you think you are special, so you no longer pay attention to us?" Kudo continued with hidden meaning, saying that she had heard about the sword dance gathering, and the Night Academy was also abuzz with rumors about him. Aster did not hesitate to praise the impressive achievements Kudo had attained. Though she was only an apprentice, she had taken part in many dangerous missions, and was the only knight awarded a Medal of Honor this year. Kudo admitted that she had worked so hard only to prove herself worthy of inheriting their father's legacy. Her gaze sharpened as she asked bluntly, "I heard you refused to become the successor. Did you do that because of me?" The sudden question made Aster feel troubled, because father had revealed this secret far too early. He tried to explain that he simply felt he was not yet worthy enough, but Kudo did not seem to accept that reason. "Is that so?" She turned away coldly, asserting that they both clearly understood what the other's true dream was, and his refusal only made her feel even more displeased. Suddenly, Kudo swung her sword, creating a blazing blue slash with astonishing power. That slash easily split an ancient tree trunk in two right before Aster's eyes. He was stunned and hurriedly dodged. Aster widened his eyes in shock at his sister's sudden attack and shouted in panic, "What are you doing? We were having a heart-to-heart, and you suddenly scared me half to death." Ignoring her stunned younger brother, Kudo stood proudly amid the smoke and declared that this was only a small test after their time apart. She smiled with excitement, then warned him, "Next I will attack for real." Aster began to panic and tried to stop her. "Wait, Sister Anfin." He was worried because the demonic sword Graham was still incomplete and extremely difficult to control. Kudo coldly reminded him that enemies on the battlefield would not listen to excuses, and a knight had to be ready to fight at all times. Without giving Aster time to recover, Kudo charged forward like a whirlwind, threatening through gritted teeth, "At this rate, I will crush you." Aster realized he had been pushed into a corner, while all his efforts to restrain his magic power until now were almost meaningless. Seeing the true killing intent in Kudo's eyes, Aster understood that if he did not act, he would certainly be in danger. With no other choice, he released all the power he had been suppressing. A blazing red stream of magic power surged from the sword and enveloped Aster. The two streams of blue and red energy collided violently, creating an explosion that shook the forest. The terrifying eruption of magic power sent everything flying and devastated a vast stretch of dense woodland. Kudo charged in like a blazing red shadow, laughing with excitement. "Your swordsmanship is still sharp. I did not expect you to keep up with me after your time at the Night Academy." Aster clenched his teeth and braced himself to endure it. However, Kudo still attacked relentlessly, mocking that strange swordsmanship from earlier and criticizing his control of magic power as chaotic and clumsy. Forced back by the pressure, Aster's feet dragged across the ground, leaving long tracks behind. He breathed out heavily. Amid the tension, he realized Sister Ryabka still was not holding back at all. Looking at his sister standing tall amid the smoke, Aster bitterly recalled the years before. In his memory, she had always been like this. Because Aster was the only son with the right of inheritance, Kudo had once regarded him as a thorn in her side. To him, this sister was no different from a violent storm, always finding all kinds of unfair reasons to force him into constant duels. She truly was his natural nemesis, one he never wanted to face. The ground trembled as the blue and red streams of magic power collided again, raising a pillar of light that pierced the heavens and tore through the clouds. Kudo stared hard at her younger brother, her eyes blazing with killing intent. She said through clenched teeth that Aster was completely unworthy of becoming the next patriarch. Watching the battle outside from the window, Manhwa anxiously asked her father whether it was truly fine to let the two siblings settle this themselves. Contrary to his daughter's unease, Viscount Hyfrid calmly watched the confrontation and gave his assessment. "In a way, they are wonderful opponents for each other. Though it is a little reckless, this will not lead to tragedy." Though she heard her father's reassurance, Manhwa still broke out in a cold sweat, and could only hope everything would be just as he said. Returning to the desk, Manhwa went straight to the point. Why did father call us back from the academy? Surely it is not only because of the inheritance. Hyford silently placed a letter with a red wax seal on the table. None other than an urgent summons from the Elmheim family. He revealed the haunting truth in a low voice. It seems the elders of the main clan want to see for themselves what this nephew is like. The boy has entered the family's sights, so how he can live in peace is the real problem. Looking at the letter, Manhwa was shocked to realize the matter was far more serious than she had imagined. Hayfred's face darkened, and he spoke a warning that sent a chill down the listener's spine. In the worst case, we may lose Aster. Meanwhile, in the forest, the clashing swords still released blazing blue streams of magic power that tore across space. Aster braced himself to endure the assault while shouting angrily, "Stop talking nonsense, I already refused the inheritance." Yet that explanation only made Kudo's anger flare even more violently. She clenched her teeth, her eyes blazing almost out of control as she swung her sword. "That is exactly what drives me mad." Feeling the terrifying weight pressing down on his blade, Aster could only grind his teeth in helplessness. Too heavy, damn it. The sight of a younger brother being bullied by his older sister felt strangely familiar, as though it had also happened somewhere around us before. Haha. Aster felt as if he were facing a giant dog wielding a sledgehammer, the pressure from Kudo leaving him breathless. Though Aster tried to persuade her to listen, Kudo only answered coldly, "You are just running away, are you not?" Her sword strikes were both fast and powerful, forcing Aster to do nothing but brace himself against them in pain. What kind of monster strength is this? Kudo overwhelmed him while lecturing him, saying that someone like him, who only knew how to swing a sword recklessly, was merely third-rate. She declared that only when one could control magic power could one step into the second rank, and only by mastering the path of the demonic sword could one deserve first rank. Looking at her struggling younger brother beneath her feet, Kudo said in disappointment, "You have disappointed me, Aster." She analyzed the gap between wing emblems. Each difference in wings meant strength tripled, both in magic and physical power. In theory, Kudo's 5 wings lost to Aster's 7 wings, but in reality he was only dodging with clumsy swordsmanship, teaching him while scolding and humiliating him. Only a beloved older sister could do such a thing. Kudo continued digging into Aster's mind, asking whether he did not dare trust his own power, or whether he was afraid of losing control like the accident that happened 3 years ago. That question was like a bucket of cold water poured straight over Aster, leaving him stunned as he wondered. Afraid. Could I truly be afraid of the power of 7 wings? After that, Aster stared fixedly at the demonic sword Graham. He realized that the instability all this time existed precisely because he had deliberately suppressed his magic power. Opposite him, Kudo roared with envy. "Aster, you possess the very thing I have always longed for, yet you are letting that gift rot away. If you do not know how to cherish it, hand everything over to me." She unleashed a full-force strike. That blow created a horrifying explosion of magic that swallowed Aster whole. To think Aster was still standing, Kudo froze, wondering if he had truly blocked her full-power strike. His eyes blazing, he broke into an arrogant smile. "Thank you very much, sister. Thanks to you, I have finally awakened." Without the slightest hesitation, Aster charged straight forward without even bothering to shape his blade. That reckless move left Kudo astonished. Now he even dared to defy his own sister. He really did have a worthy older sister. Kudo realized that the mana that had just erupted was the boundless energy within the 7-wing crest. Though Aster had not fully controlled it yet, he had poured all his power into the moment of impact instead of maintaining the blade's shape. That daring tactic made Kudo marvel inwardly. "So you can come up with a good method too, you little idiot." In the midst of battle, Aster reminded himself of his second life, precious beyond measure. He swore he would not let it pass meaninglessly from the power of the sword to this new family. Giving his opponent no time to recover, Aster continued unleashing powerful crimson slashes, making Kudo only had time to gasp in shock. The sword in Aster's hand suddenly vanished. That left Kudo completely disoriented. The sword had disappeared. Immediately after, an even more terrifying killing intent covered the space as Aster closed in. He roared with determination, "I will not keep holding myself back anymore." Aster swung his hand, pouring all his violent mana into a direct strike, making Kudo's pupils shrink in horror. Had her younger brother really unlocked his power this quickly? This time might have gone a little too far. Kudo woke up on the bed, her eyes still filled with confusion. "Is this my room?" Seeing that his younger sister had awakened, Manhwa gently drew the curtains to let the sunlight spill in, then smiled and said, "You finally woke up. You really slept for a long time." Kudo sprang upright at once, memories of the terrifying match suddenly flooding back. The match with Aster, what exactly happened? Manhwa calmly explained that Aster himself had carried her all the way back to her room. The boy had even preserved his sister's dignity by lying that she had been too exhausted after the long journey and had dozed off during the match. But Kudo understood very well that the truth was certainly not that simple. She shuddered as she recalled the moment Aster's blazing crimson blade came down. In that instant between life and death, she had thought she would be struck down by Aster. But in truth, he had dispelled the mana blade himself, right before impact, letting only the remnant energy sweep past her. though she knew Aster would absolutely never truly strike down his own sister. Yet the terrifying killing intent and those blazing red eyes at that moment still made even a genius like Kudo tremble, because she had truly thought she would lose her life. Thinking of her younger brother, both terrifying and thoughtful, Kudo curled her lips into a faint smile. He really was the most annoying little brother in the world. Even though he was much smaller than her, she decisively picked up her sword and turned to call Manhwa. Manhwa, is Aster going into battle again this time? I refused to accept that result. She was fired up and wanted an immediate rematch, this time using her full strength from the start, but Manhwa calmly extinguished that intention with a single sentence. If it is Aster, then he has already left. You know that. Kudo stood frozen in the middle of the room. Silent room made her realize that her troublesome younger brother had already set off after hearing the news from Manhwa. Kudo was stunned, unable to believe her ears when she learned that the main house had sent a summons naming Aster specifically. Manhwa asked whether Kudo knew what their father had just discussed, leaving her frozen before she shouted that she had heard absolutely nothing about it. At the same time, the carriage was rolling toward the main clan. Aster gazed pensively out the window, while Viscount Hyfried anxiously explained about the people they were about to face. They were the Council of Elders, the true shadows controlling the Elmheim family from behind the scenes, made up of former family heads and seniors who still held enormous power despite having withdrawn from the front line. Hyfried was troubled, because they had paid no attention for 10 whole years, yet now summoned Aster at precisely this moment. Aster only thought they must have too much free time and grown curious. He guessed that perhaps the incident at the Sword Dance Festival had caught the attention of those old men who valued the family's honor more than life itself. According to rumor, anyone who stained Elmheim's reputation could be thrown into a cage as food for wild beasts. Seeing Aster calmly repeat those harsh punishments, Hyfried asked in astonishment where his son had heard them. Aster smiled faintly and calmly said he had only heard them by chance, and that he had also prepared himself to be punished or exiled. Seeing his father worry because he had set out with no escort, Aster reassured him that everything would be fine, then revealed that he had originally planned to leave before his sisters returned. Aster confessed that only if he was no longer nearby could Sister Kudo truly spread her wings and fly far. Thanks to the match with his sister, he had come to understand more about mastering the sword Graham and felt the power of the 7 desires more clearly. Gripping the sword tightly in his hand, Aster looked at his father with resolve and made one final request: from now on, no matter what happens to me, please do not save me. He truly was a child so understanding that it made one's heart ache. Hyfried looked at Aster with worry and asked, "Are you truly ready to survive on your own now?" Just as the atmosphere had settled into heaviness, a shout from outside immediately cut through it. "Survive on your own? What nonsense. Even the youngest is trying to act this strong now." Right after that, a figure rushed straight onto the carriage, leaving both father and son stunned. Aster widened his eyes as he recognized the familiar face. "Sister Kudo, why are you here?" He could hardly believe his sister had run after the carriage on foot for such a long distance. Kudo calmly jumped inside, panting as she complained. "How cruel, leaving quietly without saying a word to your sister." She said she had heard everything about Aster being summoned by the great elders of the main house. Even the capable Manhwa had never been called, which showed just how serious this matter was. Seeing that Kudo intended to follow, Hyfried anxiously wanted to stop her, but she firmly declared that she understood. "I heard that father called us back to watch over everything while you are away. I understand that clearly." Kudo's expression turned serious. She looked at Aster and said in a low voice, "This summons clearly has something wrong with it, which is why we have to be so cautious." She repeated Sister Manhwa's warning that Aster might never return. Seeing his sister so worried, Aster only smiled and reassured her that he was just going to meet them and talk. Suddenly, Kudo pointed straight at his face and declared, "Listen, Aster, I hate you. Because you are a man, because of the 7 desires, because you have always been treated specially." She had chased him until she was nearly exhausted, yet still had the breath to keep talking without pause. She continued pouring out everything she had kept buried. "Because you are stronger than me, because you are my younger brother, and because you always try to act like an adult." Yet beneath those harsh words was a warmth so very gentle. Kudo made it clear that no matter how strong Aster was or how mature he tried to appear, he would always be her precious younger brother. "So come back properly. After that, we will have another match. If you give up while you still have the advantage, I absolutely will not forgive you." With that, Kudo jumped without hesitation from the speeding carriage, leaving Aster still dazed before he could react. What exactly did she come here for? Hyfried watched his daughter's mischievous figure, then smiled and remarked that she truly was a good opponent. Aster silently gazed into the distance, inwardly thanking his hot-tempered yet deeply loving older sister. His eyes grew resolute, and he promised himself he would definitely return. Behind them, Kudo still stood in the dust-covered road, waving farewell to the carriage as it gradually vanished in the sunset. The moment Hyfried and Aster set foot at the main gate of the main house, they were immediately stopped. Before them stood a long line of heavily armed soldiers. ears. A guard bowed respectfully, but his voice was full of tension. "Welcome back, Lord Hyfried. The Grand Elder has been waiting inside. Are these old men planning to strike first?" Sensing something unusual, Hyfried coldly refused their escort. "I know the way," but the soldiers still pressed in firmly. "That cannot be allowed, sir. We have orders to bring both of you together." Looking at the spearheads surrounding them, Aster understood that the old man had not summoned them merely to scold his grandson. This atmosphere was nothing like that at all. Standing before the magnificent White Castle, Aster looked up at the towering spires with a complicated gaze. "How nostalgic, it has been a long time since I returned. Noticing his son's agitation, Hyfried reminded him in a low voice, "I trust you understand, Aster. Do not lose your temper, at least not today. No matter what anyone says to you." The Viscount looked worried as they walked amid the encircling guards, then added that the problem lay in how the other side would act. Alfred tried to help Aster prepare himself before the fated meeting. "Listen carefully, the person we are about to meet is..." However, of course, Aster had already been drawn away by the empty training ground in the distance. He thought to himself that Dallas was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps because that man's dominant hand had been crushed, it would be difficult for him to return for the time being. That distraction made Hyfried flare up. "Are you listening, Aster? Talking to you is like pouring water on a duck's back. Are you just going to keep wearing that blank face?" Aster jolted and turned back, hurriedly reassuring his father. "Huh? Yes, of course, I will stay silent today, because my sister told me to come back safely." Father and son stopped before the enormous wooden doors leading into the main hall. The guard's announcement rang out clearly, reporting that Lord Hyfried and his son had arrived. The great doors opened wide, revealing a vast space filled with majesty. A false laugh heavy with authority rang out from the end of the hall. "Ha, you finally came. It has been more than 10 years, has it not, my nephew Hyfried?" Hyfried immediately knelt on one knee on the red carpet and bowed respectfully. "It has been a long time, sixth family head." However, the mysterious figure on the highest seat only corrected him coldly. "No, you should call me Grand Elder." Aster narrowed his eyes at the three elders sitting imposingly on the exquisitely carved chairs. The suffocating pressure from them enveloped the entire room. Aster silently realized that this was Zenith A. Elmheim, the sixth family head, a true monster of the family. Surrounding him were influential figures under Elmheim, faces Aster had once seen at the Sword Dance Festival. But he suddenly realized that one important person was absent. "Roderick is not here. Where did that man go to miss this little play?" As if reading his thoughts, Zenith spoke coldly. "That fellow is not here, brat." He explained that as the leader of the knights serving the royal family, Roderick had no time to concern himself with matters he called trivial. Therefore, retired veterans like them had magnanimously stepped forward to handle the family's administrative affairs. Aster quietly assessed the situation. Although he had never met him in his previous life, he could clearly feel the terrifying pressure from this retired man. Seeing his father so tense that sweat was breaking out, he wondered what trivial matter they were talking about. Zenith laughed meaningfully, then said in a deep voice, "You must have guessed it as well. I heard that your beloved dog caused quite a commotion at the Sword Dance Festival." Quite a commotion indeed. Aster narrowed his eyes warily. Just as expected, that incident was the purpose of this summons. Hyfried hurriedly spoke up to protect his son, asserting that the current family head, Roderick, had personally handled and closed the matter. However, the elders immediately rejected that, saying it had only been a performance before the public, while Elmheim's reputation had been severely damaged. They said adopting a child of unknown origin had been a mistake from the start. If he dared oppose the main line, they could not turn a blind eye. Zenith spread blazing red killing tent throughout the room and coldly declared that Aster had to be expelled, while Lord Hyfried also had to be punished. Unable to let his father be implicated, Aster immediately sprang up and shouted, "Wait, I did everything on my own. My father has nothing to do with it." The boy began refuting the elders, and his calm gradually began to waver. Hyfried shut his eyes tightly, his entire body tensing with worry. Meanwhile, Aster silently observed those sitting above him. Zenith snorted coldly in contempt. As expected, this brat has no manners. A child dares interrupt while adults are speaking. That old man began displaying his authority. "There are 12,000 knights under my banner. We bear the name Elmheim, but the knight order is far from united. Many are eyeing the highest seat." His gaze swept across the elders around him, each of whom maintained a stern expression. Then he continued in a deep voice, "Of course, even this place is no exception." Zenith stood, slammed his staff hard against the floor, and declared with overwhelming authority, "We merely want peace of mind. Proof that you are not someone who will harm Elmheim is..." Suddenly the old man drew a blazing red magic sword. He pointed the sword straight at Hyfried, leaving him stunned. Then the old man brought up the humiliation of years past, when you failed to guard your master and dragged Elmheim's reputation into the mud. It was here that we let Roderick cut off that arm. Zenith's eyes blazed red with madness. Then the old man growled the order, "This time, finish that brat." Faced with that cold demand, Aster stared blankly at his father's back. But Hyfried stood firm as a rock and declared decisively, "I refuse. If I must cut down my own child with my own hands, I would rather end myself." Hearing that ironclad declaration, Aster softly exclaimed in emotion, "Wow." Zenith merely curled his lips and replied coldly, "Is that so?" At this point, the old man firmly planted his sword against the stone floor. Zenith cruelly pronounced his death sentence, "You should die, and so should your wife, your daughters, and that brat. All of them must disappear." The old man laughed in delight, declaring that from today onward, the Viscount's family would be erased from the map. In the next instant, all the guards drew their swords at once and charged forward. They surrounded them tightly and pressed sharp sword tips against the necks of Hyfried and his son, leaving him only able to grit his teeth in helplessness. Amid the ring of blades and spears, Aster suddenly spoke in a mocking, defiant voice. "Why are you so afraid, Grand Elder?" That taunting question made Zenith freeze. The old man widened his eyes and asked, "Surprised, old man?" Aster showed no fear at all and continued digging into the ruler's worry. "Are you afraid of being bitten back by your own loyal dog? But if you dare touch my family," he clenched the front of his shirt, his eyes flaring with killing intent. Seeing the stunned look on his father's face, Aster fell silent. He silently apologized to his father, because he was still not good at keeping quiet, then tore open his shirt to reveal his bare back. The guards were so horrified that their tongues tied. "What is that glowing on his back?" A blazing red mark with 7 enormous pairs of wings appeared with stunning clarity. It gave off a terrifying crimson current of magic that enveloped the surrounding space. In the atmosphere frozen by fear, Aster roared out a warning. "When that happens, these 7 wings will become Elmheim's enemy." The entire hall instantly sank into shock. Whispers rose without end. "What is going on? Could that really be the 7-wing crest?" For hundreds of years, that crest had never appeared on a human body. Zenith narrowed his eyes at the blazing red mark on Aster's back, then pressed him. "You understand the meaning of what you are showing, do you not?" Facing the blades pressed close to his neck, Aster still answered calmly, "Of course, people say the more wings one has, the easier it is to attract the world's attention." Suddenly, a blue-haired young man sitting nearby burst into laughter with great amusement. "Haha. My apologies, please go on." Zenith explained in a deep voice that the wing crest was originally an organ created by spirits to share magic with humans. Over many generations, humans had constantly developed that power, but no one had ever reached the realm of 7 wings. Except for the spirit race, the ancestors who had first created this power. Aster grew doubtful. Could I belong to that race? Aster cast aside every conjecture and declared that he was the son of the Hyfried family, then coldly asked whether they dared turn him into an enemy. Fortunately, he was still clear-headed enough not to let them lead him by the nose about his origins. He had almost become their prey. Aster analyzed the situation in a firm voice. "Even if I am expelled from Elmheim, there will still be countless knights and nobles willing to welcome someone bearing the 7-wing crest." He pointed out the true fear of those in power. A rebellion could break out if they let him fall into someone else's hands. That influence might even surpass Duke Roderick himself. Looking at the faces that had gone pale with fear, Aster said coldly that even Elmheim was not united. The Hyfried family had once witnessed a civil war drag the entire kingdom into chaos, so Aster knew that tragedy could happen again. Every gaze gathered on the blazing red mark on Aster's back. Zenith asked through gritted teeth, "Do you think you are worth that much?" The old man had yielded only because of power and ambition. The old man was still doubtful, because nothing had proven that those 7 wings were real. Faced with that suspicion, Aster curled his lips in challenge. "If you think it is fake, then kill me right here. But doing so means war will begin." Aster understood inwardly that if Elmheim truly made a move, dealing with him now would not be difficult. He was only waiting to see how these old men would take the bait. Just as the atmosphere grew tense to the extreme, the blue-haired man suddenly spoke and cut in. "Well, it seems this conversation is only being dragged out further." He smiled calculatingly, then proposed to Zenith, "My lord, why not set a trial?" To the astonishment of the nobles, Count Mace said this was a chance to verify the power of the 7 wings. Looking into those blue eyes, Aster was stunned as he realized that this person was Count Mace. There was no doubt that man was definitely an ally. That old man was truly skilled at seizing the moment, currying favor with this side while not making the other side lose face. "Very well, follow me." The old man spoke with an authoritative tone as he walked. Correcting the way an ignorant grandson speaks is also a grandfather's responsibility. Aster was then led to a dark cellar. The surrounding darkness and the rusted iron chains made the place feel cold, connected deep down to the waterways and shelter. Zenith revealed that this was an emergency evacuation bunker, but the family had secretly raised a ferocious, magical inside. Walking through the gloomy space, Viscount Hyfried anxiously reminded his son, "I told you to keep it hidden." Aster calmly replied that something so conspicuous would be exposed sooner or later, and that this was a chance for him to prove himself. Standing before the mouth of the deep, bottomless pit, Hyfried reminded him again, "Do not lose your guard because you are impatient." Without the slightest hesitation, Aster grabbed the chain and plunged into the abyss, leaving behind only one sentence. then I will go first. From above, Count Mace silently watched, a meaningful smile playing on his lips. When his feet touched the icy water at the bottom of the dungeon, Aster immediately felt darkness envelop him. This place truly was pitch black. Although his eyes could see in the dark, Aster still struggled, because his field of vision had narrowed considerably. It was not exactly too terrible, but he could hardly see anything clearly. From above, Zenith's voice rang down, full of mockery. He said someone had once been given a chance to cleanse his reputation here, but in the end, only a miserable end on the ground remained. Suddenly, a massive black shadow with glowing eyes appeared behind Aster. The Grand Elder warned in a cold voice, "Do not disappoint me, brat." The magical beast was covered in vivid blue fur, radiating a strange purple energy, its blood-red eyes blazing with rage. It opened its mouth and roared, revealing sharp fangs as if ready to tear its prey apart. Facing the ferocious creature charging toward him, Aster decisively drew his sword, ready to step into a life-or-death trial. As expected, the rumors that Elmham raised magical beasts in the mansion were not baseless. Looking at the broken sword and blood-stained hand of the previous failure, Aster steeled his mind as the beast roared and charged in with murderous intent. Aster lightly dodged its vicious pounce. Sword strikes as fluid as Joshua's made the monster collapse at once. Yet before his smile could fade, disaster struck. From the beast's back, purple tentacles suddenly burst out. The sight made Aster cry out in shock. What is that? He was stunned to realize this was not an ordinary magical beast, but a truly immortal undead. Witnessing that evil scene from above, Viscount Hyfried shouted in fury, demanding why such a disgusting thing was in the mansion dungeon. Zenith indifferently explained that this creature was extremely sensitive to the scent of blood and death, so he had raised it to serve swordsmanship experiments. He calmly said it would not die even if it were cut down or burned, and that it also had the task of quietly disposing of things the family did not need to keep. Hyfried sharply retorted that making someone face an immortal monster was an excessive trial, even for seasoned knights. He questioned whether Zenith was deliberately trying to have the one called the Seven Wings die here. Zenith merely sneered, coldly declaring that if Aster died, it would only prove he was a third-rate fraud. To him, someone without true wings was not even worthy of being an ornament. He even calmly said that even if Aster lost his life, he would still have value to exploit, and his death might even be a more favorable outcome. Behind the iron bars, Count Mace only watched in silence with an unreadable smile. Count Mace coldly looked down from above and thought to himself, "Since you boasted that much, do not die too easily, Aster." In the dark dungeon below, Aster kept swinging his sword to attack, but he soon realized the slashes were almost useless. No matter how many times he cut, he still could not feel the slightest resistance. The monster was almost completely unharmed, and its wound regeneration far surpassed ordinary undead. In essence, undead were beings no longer alive. To destroy them completely, one had to burn them away with sunlight or purify their dark souls with a holy relic. Without either method, every guide to fighting undead always avoiding combat. The longer the fight dragged on, the more one's strength would be worn away. Yet Aster firmly declared, "Of course I have no intention of retreating. If I only use ordinary techniques, what meaning would the title of Seven Wings even have?" To prove his true worth, he decided to pour all his strength into a single blow. "I will crush this undead with pure power." They witnessed the fierce eruption of magic. Everyone was stunned and wondered, what terrifying kind of magic is this? Could this be the ultimate power of the Seven Wings? Alfred and the others were just as shaken. What on earth is happening below? Did he defeat it already? Amid the thick cloud of dust and smoke, Aster still stood firm, his hand gripping his sword tightly. Zenith only coldly uttered one sentence. How unfortunate." At that very moment, a black shadow suddenly lunged at him with terrifying speed. Aster was pinned hard to the ground by its enormous claws. The monster roared ferociously, charging in as if to finish him off. The sight made Hyfried cry out in panic and despair. At the critical moment, Count Mace suddenly stopped the Viscount, who was about to leap down to save his son. "You are not planning to do something so ordinary as jumping down to save him, are you?" Hyfried was furious at being stopped, forced to stand and watch his son face danger. Mace calmly advised him to settle down. Easy to say if it were his own child. Could that man really stand still? He pointed down into the deep pit and said, "Look closely below, it seems that Brat is still calculating something." Sure enough, even while pinned to the ground, Aster still wore a confident smile and thought to himself, "Good." It seemed this method was taking effect. The magical beast suddenly became gaunt and withered, as if its life force had been drained away. Aster decisively swung his sword, piercing through the evil creature's body. He roared with determination. "Then I only need to repeat it, again and again until you truly disappear." Blazing crimson slashes were unleashed one after another at an astonishing speed. They were dizzyingly fast, crushing the monster's body bit by bit. Looking at that masterful footwork, Hyfried was stunned to realize he had seen it somewhere before. He judged that this technique was somewhat different from his memory, but its power was undeniable. The blazing crimson storm of swords enveloped the monster, creating terrifying pressure that shook the dungeon. The guards panicked as the ceiling began to collapse. Before that horrifying sight, Grand Elder Zenith wondered in shock. Is this the true power of the 7 wings? You stubborn old man, it is time to accept the truth. As the dust gradually cleared, the observers still stood frozen in utter shock. Someone stammered, wondering whether everything had truly ended, while every gaze turned toward the deep pit where the demonic beast had just vanished. From above, Zenith, with his blazing red eyes, realized Aster had not used any especially profound technique at all. He had merely used the overwhelming force of his enormous magic power, dragging that zombie corpse into a great vortex and crushing it to pieces. Amid the ruins, Aster softly breathed out, his eyes still shining fiercely, forcing Zenith to admit that the power of the 7-winged mark was truly different. Zenith turned to Highfried and asked whether this extraordinary growth had been within his expectations from the start. The Viscount had still not recovered from his shock, admitting that even he had not expected his son to progress to such a degree. Count Mace smiled triumphantly, cutting through the tense atmosphere and asking whether the elder had acknowledged the test result yet. Looking at the pale faces around him, Zenith bluntly declared that no one here would dare object anymore. Mace eagerly called down into the pit, announcing that Aster had officially passed the trial and urging him to climb up quickly. Aster looked back at the iron chain that had been destroyed by the aftershock of his own attack. He scratched his head awkwardly and asked whether everyone could lower a rope. A hero who could not climb out on his own was honestly a little embarrassing. After coming back up, Aster had a private conversation with Zenith in a luxurious room. The elder reminded him that if he missed the opportunity to enter the main family, there would never be a second chance. With his back still marked by tears from the battle, Aster said firmly that he had no interest in the struggle for succession. He stated frankly that if he kept lingering in this mansion, his cousins would never be at peace, while the place he was heading toward was still the Highfried family. Hearing that, Zenith burst into loud laughter and asked whether Aster truly thought those words sounded modest. The old man's gaze sharpened as he affirmed that Aster could not hide the ambition in his eyes. Zenith slowly asked whether Aster intended to point his sword at the Elmheim family in the future, making Aster immediately fall silent in vigilance. The old man delivered the final psychological blow by saying that his true target was Roderick. Seeing Aster freeze, Zenith laughed loudly and told him not to be on guard, because he had no intention of digging deeper into his mind yet. Aster asked suspiciously why the old man would do that. Was the rebel faction not their enemy? Zenith calmly admitted that Elmheim's internal unity was nothing like its outward appearance. He knew very well that Roderick was powerful, domineering, and difficult to control. Therefore, if Aster could become a force to restrain him, the old man was willing to accept it. But Zenith's gaze suddenly turned icy as he warned that if Aster turned his sword toward him, the consequences would be extremely grave. Aster quietly stepped through the door, inwardly sighing. As expected of that hateful old monster from the Elmheim family, as soon as he saw Aster come out, Viscount Highfried hurried over in panic and asked what the two of them had discussed. Aster calmly said that the Grand Elder wanted to bring him into the main family, but he had refused. Hearing that, Highfried was so shocked he froze in place. To him, rejecting the chance to enter the main house was far too wasteful, and there was no reason to pass up such a bargain. Count Mace approached from behind, reminding Aster that if he officially belonged to the main family, he would receive far greater privileges than he currently had. Aster narrowed his eyes at the mysterious blue-haired man and asked directly, "You are Count Mace, are you not? Why did you help me earlier?" What answered that suspicion was a smile full of hidden meaning. "What are you talking about? I only felt like teasing a little brat with an arrogant face like yours." However, Mace immediately withdrew his joking expression. He placed a hand on Aster's shoulder and spoke in a solemn voice. "But set that matter aside for now. From today onward, you have truly become the bearer of the 7-winged mark, both in name and in reality." He made Aster look around to clearly see the weight of the 7-winged symbol. In the dazzling hall, the nobles' gazes poured toward him, filled with terrifying schemes. Some coveted him and wanted to seize him at any cost. Some feared him and wanted to eliminate him before he became an obstacle. And some viewed him only as a tool to exploit. Mace coldly gave his final warning. "From now on, the number of people targeting you will increase greatly, and the trouble will certainly continue." Aster narrowed his eyes and looked at Count Mace with deep suspicion. "Then are you one of them as well, Count?" Before the boy's obvious wariness, Mace calmly revealed that he was a member of the Knight Academy Council, and that creating trials for young talents was also part of his duty. At the same time, he subtly gestured toward the old men standing over there, implying that they had the same intention as well. Mace smiled meaningfully, expressing that he greatly looked forward to the day Aster officially entered their academy. "We will meet again soon, Aster." That man waved goodbye in a friendly manner. Watching the blue-haired man's figure, Aster silently judged him to be an extremely strange person, and it was still far too early to consider him an ally. Viscount Highfried stepped forward and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. He urged him to set off for home quickly, so they could tell his sisters about today's outstanding performance. Aster smiled softly in response to his father, but inwardly worried that if his mother saw this wound, she would probably faint. Meanwhile, at the main mansion, a knight knelt and reported shocking news to Roderick. Captain, young Master Dallas died during Lord Zenith's test. Instead of grieving for his son, Roderick merely said coldly that he understood, then immediately asked about Hyfrid's child, who had just been summoned by the Elder. The knight wondered in shock whether he truly did not care in the slightest about his own biological son. To that man, children were perhaps nothing more than external possessions. Keep speaking, Roderick ordered with an expression devoid of emotion. Without changing expression at all, the knight continued reporting that everything had gone exactly as predicted. That child truly carried the seven-winged mark. Worried that the balance of power within Elmheim would collapse, the knight asked whether they should act to stop him. However, Roderick remained cold and gave a decisive order to leave it alone. Sitting imposingly on the seat of power, that man declared that if Elmheim could be shaken by an obstacle of this level, it would have been wiped out long ago. Roderick sat on the throne, coldly looking down at the knight kneeling at his feet, calmly saying that he did not need to hurry because those legendary wings would belong to him sooner or later. To this ruthless duke, allowing Aster to exist freely was merely an interesting pastime until the proper moment arrived. He wanted to see how far the child who had once escaped from his hands back then could endure. Roderick smiled with calculated intent, his blazing red eyes revealing clear possessiveness as he mentioned the name Aster, the seven-winged child he had once searched for. Time flew by, and 4 years later, at the gates of the prestigious Dorison Knight Academy, the atmosphere grew livelier than ever. The loudspeaker announcement rang out clearly, asking the examinees to quickly gather for the exam registration process. Amid the packed crowd, the appearance of a tall, mature figure immediately drew curious gazes and whispers. "Hey, is that not the famous person? No way, I heard he was supposed to have a much more muscular build." Ignoring the chatter, Aster walked to the registration desk, where the person in charge coldly pushed a written pledge in front of him. The guard emphasized that the kingdom and the academy bore no responsibility for injuries or accidents during the exam. After that, he demanded the mandatory procedure: present your wing mark for inspection. We cannot allow anyone deficient in magic to sneak in here. The person in charge flipped through each page of the roster, but when he read the next name, he suddenly froze in astonishment. Very well, next is the mark of Aster F. Elmheim. Under the official's stunned gaze, the 14-year-old boy curled his lips into a faint smile and slowly turned around. His eyes blazing with arrogance, Aster answered calmly in a provocative voice. "You want to see my mark? Unfortunately, it is in a rather delicate place, so it is not convenient to show casually. Can I pass with this face instead?" In the pure white grounds of the Knight Academy, Aster immediately became the focus of countless scrutinizing gazes. An arrogant young man walked over and called out loudly, "I am talking to you, yes, you, the one wearing that smug look." He introduced himself as Vigor Smith, then began mocking him. "You look completely unfamiliar, no idea which distinguished young master you are, but have you come to the wrong place?" He pompously pointed at the academy emblem, deliberately emphasizing it. Vigor lifted his chin and asked, "Do you know? This is the entrance exam site for the proud knight cadets of the kingdom." Contrary to his agitation, Aster merely answered calmly that if so there was no problem, then brushed past as though that man did not exist. Ignored, Vigor shouted angrily for him to stop. He rattled on, saying that everyone here had endured harsh training and dreamed of stepping onto the glorious path of the elite. This guy might be better suited to being a teacher than a student, right everyone? He really can talk without getting tired. Looking at the sword at Aster's waist, Vigor sneered, "You are wearing something tiny like a child's toy. This place is not meant for an immature swordsman like you." He rudely waved his hand to drive him away. "Come now, if you are only here to look around, please go home, hurry up and leave." Smith's bullying of newcomers did not escape the eyes of the other examinees. They remarked wearily that he had started again. Smith had always been the type to pick fights with newcomers, putting on the same act every year, without ever getting tired of it. But another examinee suddenly noticed something strange and reminded his friend in a low voice. "The important thing is that the person he is picking a fight with seems to be the Elmheim family member from the rumors. You know, that is the rumored seven-wing Aster." The news immediately left the young man stunned. Just then, a figure slowly approached from behind. He spoke in a smug, mocking voice. "Well now, I was wondering who this was, and it turns out to be my cousin Aster. Another buzzing fly has come to your ear, how annoying." Aster turned to look at the one who had just spoken, his eyes narrowing warily. It was Gurion, another member of Elmheim's main line. He put on a fake smile and stepped forward to greet him. "Gurion, long time no see, brother." He casually mocked Aster's murky origins, saying that no one knew when or where he had been born, so he would take the liberty of calling him cousin. Facing that attitude, Aster remained composed and mentioned Dallas. "About Dallas, I truly am sorry." Gurion immediately brushed it off with contempt, asserting that he did not need to concern himself. A man who disgraced the family like him deserved that ending. Gurion did not even hide his satisfaction. To be honest, I even felt relieved when he disappeared. Gurion continued pouring out his feelings about his late brother, saying Dallas was nothing but an arrogant man who liked lecturing others and was no more than a nuisance. Yet immediately after that, he switched to a threatening tone. I do not care whether you are 7-wing or anything of the sort, but you had better not look down on those from the main house. He turned and left, leaving behind a chilling warning that no one here would step forward to protect him anymore. The appearance of 2 Elmheim family members made the surrounding examinees worry about their own luck. Running into opponents of this caliber, they might only manage if they ganged up on them. Crowd began whispering about the hidden conflict between the main line and the branch line of the famed war god family, everyone afraid of being dragged into trouble. Amid that, another examinee timidly approached Aster and asked, "Wait, are you? No, it has to be you. You are from the Elmheim family, right?" Aster smiled faintly, politely offered his hand, and replied, "Just call me Aster, Senior." The venue for the first round was quickly announced in a solemn atmosphere. A commander stood high above, congratulated the examinees for their efforts in reaching this place, then began an impassioned speech, expressing gratitude for their courage and patriotism. The commander emphasized the difference between the kingdom's knights and the provincial knights, affirming that they served the king. He clenched his fist before his chest and roared that they were proud swords, ready to sacrifice themselves in battle. You do not need useless dull blades. No matter what school you enter, you always have to hear a few ideas like this at the start. Every school is the same. Treat today's exam as a real battlefield and show us your full worth. The commander's shout resounded throughout the arena. Standing among the crowd of examinees, Aster curled his lips faintly, thinking those words were truly ridiculous. Yet an indescribable emotion surged in his heart, because he had finally returned to this place. This was the path to becoming a kingdom knight, something that in his previous life, when he had been wingless, he had not even been allowed to touch. Beyond this door was the world of the strong that he had never been able to reach in his previous life. And the one standing at the pinnacle of that world was the commander-in-chief of the kingdom knights, Roderick A. Looking at the imposing back of the enemy in his mind, Aster gritted his teeth and swore, "Just wait, Roderick, I will catch up to you soon. A gentleman's revenge is never too late. Even after 10 years, slowly but surely, everything will be settled." To achieve that ambition, he first had passed this grueling entrance exam. The announcement over the speakers rang out, cutting through his thoughts. "Very well, let us begin. This is the first test." In an instant, from high above, sharp spears tore through the air and fell like rain, plunging straight into the unsuspecting group of examinees and throwing the scene into chaos. Aster was stunned by the first challenge, known as the Vanguard Tower. The last one still standing would claim victory. Examiner's cold declaration rang out amid the piercing screams. Magical spears continued pouring down from the top of the tower. They turned this place into a chaotic melee as the examinees were suddenly attacked from every direction. The panicked examinees shouted in despair, "What are we supposed to do with this damned thing? Run if we stay, we will all die." Amid the dense rain of spears, the examinees shouted for one another to gather, protect the rear, and resist the assault together. From above, the examiner watched coldly and judged that although those with experience were trying to resist, the survival rate was still only around 30%. Those superficial responses would soon reach their limit as more and more people fell beneath the sharp magical spears. If going to school means taking one test and losing your life like this, I am withdrawing. What the Academy truly wanted to see was superior problem-solving ability, something only those who truly possessed the wing emblem could achieve. In the middle of the chaotic battlefield, Aster still stood motionless like a statue, causing those around him to grow suspicious. Why is that idiot just standing there with a blank face? Gurion narrowed his eyes in contempt, thinking Aster had frozen stiff with fear, secretly hoping he would be pinned full of arrows like a porcupine. Yet Aster's hands had silently settled on the sword hilt, ready for a shocking eruption. Suddenly, crimson mana burst forth, tearing across the space around Aster. With a single sword strike, he created a massive vortex that knocked away every arrow. Witnessing that unbelievable scene, the other candidates stood frozen in shock. Did he just blow away all those arrows? Amid the blazing red storm, Aster raised head high, his eyes shining with pride. He curled his lips in challenge. "Go on, shoot everything at me." Amid the dense rain of arrows, Aster released a surge of blazing crimson mana. He twisted it into a violent whirlwind that wrapped around his entire body. Before that unimaginable sight, one candidate cried out in terror. What kind of monster is he? Not a single arrow can touch him. Even the proctor could not help being astonished by his remarkable control over mana. At that moment, Aster seemed to be standing at the eye of an inviolable gale. The attack came to a stop, and those who had managed to remain standing still looked around the wreckage in shock, wondering if everything had truly ended. The proctor observed coldly, then announced in a clear voice, "All of you did quite well. Look at those who have fallen around you. Those still standing here are the ones who have passed the first test." Without giving the candidates time to recover, he immediately ordered everyone to follow him to the next location. Seeing the senior beside him grumbling about how cruel the proctor was, Aster curled his lips slightly and asked, "What is wrong? Are you already exhausted? Looks like you know how to mock others quite well too." The senior gaped in astonishment at Aster's calm expression. Even though he had just consumed an enormous amount of magic, he inwardly marveled at Aster's 7-wing power, then eagerly waited to witness the next battle. Meanwhile, Gurion silently received an order, a secret and vicious directive from a powerful shadow. "For the sake of the family, you must stop him from becoming a royal knight. Everything is for the future of our Elmheim family." Entering the next round, the organizers suddenly required all candidates to switch to identical standard swords to ensure fairness. While many people around him looked displeased by this cumbersome procedure, Aster silently handed over his treasured sword. A sharp-eyed candidate realized that this sudden rule was certainly meant to guard against his strange sword. Aster looked at the standard sword in his hand, his expression briefly pensive. Suddenly, Gurion approached with his lackeys, sneering with malice. "As expected of my cousin, it seems you have managed to tame a subordinate." Those words made the senior standing beside Aster panic and retort, "Who is whose subordinate?" Gurion coldly recognized him as the heir of the Smith barony, then leaned close to his ear and threatened him. "A rustic third-rate noble who chooses the wrong master will pay the price." Too frightened by the authority of the main family, the senior immediately changed sides and hurriedly waved his hands. "Wait, young Master Gurion, I have nothing to do with him." Aster merely curled his lips into a faint smile at that lightning-fast change in attitude. The atmosphere around them gradually grew heavy as the candidates began guarding against one another. Just then, the judge loudly announced the rules of the second test. The first round is an offense and defense battle. All candidates will be divided into 3 teams and carry out a mission to capture strongholds in this forest. Whichever team plants its flag on the platform at a base will be considered to have successfully occupied it. Before the closing bell rings, the team that captures 2 or more strongholds will win. The judge emphasized that destroying or stealing a flag in a way that made it unusable was forbidden. Aside from that, all other actions were permitted. "The swords have been given to you. Treat them as licenses to cut down enemies on the battlefield." The examiner clearly announced the list of candidates who would face each other in the exam. Gurion stood confidently beneath the red flag, while the timid Baron Smith belonged to the yellow team. Aster stood silently beneath the green flag. His eyes brightened, filled with focus as he observed each opponent. When smoke rose from the fortress, signaling the start of the test, Aster immediately entered the forest. From now on, strength would decide everything, and classmates had become enemies too. Looking at the green flag in his hand, Aster quickly analyzed the situation. Each base had 3 flags, and to win they had to capture at least 2 strongholds including their own base. Among the 3 participating teams, only one team would ultimately pass this exam. Was that really how it worked? Aster's teacher confirmed it, making the teammate beside him reveal clear unease. "Then we definitely have to face House Elmham." Aster simply stared straight ahead in silence, his eyes heavy with thought. Aster's teammates trembled in fear. One of them broke out in sweat and asked in panic if he truly did not understand. "We are terrified. The most frightening thing is retaliation from the Elmham family." He explained that their opponent was the young master of the main branch. As long as they pointed a sword at him, their future as knights could vanish like smoke. Worse still, their families and subordinates could also be implicated. No one wanted to turn such a powerful bloodline into an enemy. Aster asked back in a cold voice, "Then are you planning to give up on this exam?" They accepted defeat this time in order to stay alive. After all, exams could be taken again, which was better than trading away their entire future. In this place, for those without power, that family was an obsession not easily escaped. The Elmham clan was no different from the shadow of a tyrant, and Gurion was the symbol of that terrifying reign. Aster charged alone through the forest, thinking to himself that he never expected to be isolated in a team battle. But he also understood why everyone was afraid. The abnormal silence in the forest made Aster begin to feel suspicious. Since no clashes had occurred yet, he wondered whether the teams were wary of one another or whether some other scheme was at play. As he passed through the old stone walls, Aster suddenly stopped because a mysterious blonde youth had appeared behind him. That man spoke in surprise. "I did not expect you would truly dare come all the way here alone." Everything was unfolding exactly as some mysterious person had predicted. Aster was stunned to see the other youth openly lower his own team's flag. That man gave an unreadable smile. "Perfect timing, I happen to be free too, so let me accompany you for a while." Had plotted to surround him, leaving almost no chance of escape. Aster had not even had time to understand what was happening. He had already seen Gurion appear with a large group of people, their momentum overwhelming. That man smiled wickedly, then declared that he would show Aster how House Elmham fought. The second round of the Royal Knights selection exam began with an offense and defense battle. 20 candidates were divided into 3 teams, and to win, they had to capture at least 2 bases before time ran out. Amid the fierce clashes, Aster quickly encountered a formidable opponent. While swinging his sword to block the powerful attacks, he asked in doubt, "Are you not from the yellow team?" Aster looked at the blonde youth before him with eyes full of suspicion. "Then why are you planting the red flag?" The youth with cold blue eyes replied calmly, "It is simple. Because we have formed an alliance with House Elmheim. He was Christopher Nolan, the legitimate son of the prestigious Nolan family, heir to the royal swordsmanship. Although he had been overshadowed by Aster's seven-winged halo in the first round, in truth, only Aster and Nolan had passed the trial without changing expression. Both were regarded as precious uncut gems of the knightly world, but regrettably, this round did not allow them to advance together. Blocked by his opponent, Aster gritted his teeth and asked an alliance, "Do you understand what you are doing? Even if you do this, in the end only one team can win." Nolan calmly admitted it. That was why he chose to let the main family win, while also revealing that his teammates and the Elmham people were attacking Aster's base. Nolan said that if they resisted them, the Smith family of the other candidates would be in danger because of Gurion's threat. He coldly compared it to blocking a carriage. To him, the noble knightly world had always been clearly stratified, and this was merely how those with noble blood protected their interests. The moment of violent collision, Aster gritted his teeth and poured his strength into withstanding the attack. But a crack rang out, leaving him stunned. Cracks spread across the blade, making Aster realize that this standard sword was strangely abnormal. Could it be that the examiner back then had given him a defective item? Why had he only realized it now? Was he being too honest? Nolan continued to overwhelm him with powerful sword strokes and declared that this was entirely a duel between the two of them. He did not hide his disgust toward House Elmheim, especially toward showy types like Aster. At the very moment Aster's standard sword could no longer withstand the pressure, it shattered, making Aster cry out in shock. What is going on? But instead of retreating, he quickly grabbed a sharp fragment, poured crimson mana into it, and counterattacked. That unexpected strike shocked Nolan so much that he blurted out. Taking advantage of his opponent's daze, Aster immediately spun around and rushed out of the battle. Nolan shouted angrily, trying to run, "Stop right there." Ignoring the insult, Aster roared with determination that he would deal with him later. For now, he had someone else who needed to be dealt with urgently. Watching Aster's back, Nolan contemptuously believed that he had been scared out of his wits and was a disgrace to the knightly world. Nolan picked up a broken sword fragment from the ground and immediately realized that its quality was abnormally poor. Even compared to cheap goods, it was still far too inferior. He silently understood that this was definitely the work of the Elmham lot. They dared play dirty to ruin this fun. Meanwhile, Aster had managed to run back to his team's camp. He called out in panic, "Smith, are you still all right?" But then he realized the whole group had vanished, leaving him with no idea where to find support. On the castle wall, Gurion appeared with a triumphant smile. He mocked Aster for arriving faster than expected, saying Nolan had not managed to stall for long. Gurion calmly announced that his team had just captured the third base, then declared that it was absolute domination. Aster clenched his teeth, his eyes blazing with rage as he saw his teammates fallen all over the ground. He lowered his voice and asked, "What did you do to my teammates?" Gurion looked at the scene before him with a face full of delight. At the same time, an icy blade suddenly pressed close against Aster's back. The one who struck was none other than Smith, the senior who had been flattering him earlier and had now vilely turned on him. "Ah, that matter. Do not blame me." That man backed away while trying to justify his betrayal. "I said from the start that I would not follow you, did I not? I would never stand with a fool who dares oppose Elmham." From atop the high city wall, Gurion burst in delighted laughter at the sight of his cousin being isolated. "Ha ha ha ha." That lot did not even bother resisting. He looked down at Aster with contempt and added, "Even if they are country bumpkins, they still know enough to choose the right side. Now then." Aster remained terrifyingly calm. He asked again in a low voice, "Do you truly think that gathering enough people will let you defeat me?" Gurion curled his lips with confidence. "No, not at all, brother, you have misunderstood. I have already won." "So confident are you just relying on your family background?" He leisurely repeated the rules, saying that to win this offense and defense match, one had to hold at least 2 bases when the contest ended. Gurion pointed out Aster's dead end. "Even if you desperately run off now to plant a flag at another base, you no longer have anyone to guard it." He smugly said his team only needed to wait for Aster to leave, then calmly switch it to the red flag, and it would be over. He raised 2 fingers in assertion, "Just 2 bases. If we hold that much, we win." Aster's gaze suddenly turned icy sharp, and declared coldly, "Then I will make sure you cannot carry out that plan by defeating every last one of your people." The pressure he gave off made Gurion's subordinates tremble in fear, and yet Gurion still kept his triumphant expression. He sneered, "It is nothing but intimidation. That sword is broken, is it not?" He pointed down at the pieces of the standard sword scattered across the ground. "Even if you have 7 wings, without a weapon, you are just a bird with its wings clipped. But a penguin is still a bird, I suppose." Gurion continued, provoking him, "Or do you intend to fight all of us here by yourself?" Looking at the broken sword in his hand, Aster faintly curled his lips. Impressive. Let us see. He decisively let go, allowing the remaining blade to shatter and fall to the ground. That strange action left Smith stunned speechless. Aster looked straight at the enemy and admitted, "You calculated everything far more carefully than I expected." Gurion screamed in his mind that he had already won when he saw Aster's weapon completely destroyed. Yet Aster's eyes still shone with a mysterious brilliance, as though he were preparing to play his final card and reverse the board. The moment the traitor was about to strike, Aster suddenly tilted his body and dodged with astonishing speed. He unleashed a lightning-fast kick, sending his opponent flying far away. This is the price for trying tricks. Without giving his opponent time to recover, Aster turned into a blazing red streak of light. He charged through the encirclement with overwhelming power, magical slashes flashing one after another. Gurion's subordinates collapsed one by one in the blink of an eye. Standing amid the chaos, Aster lifted his head toward the city wall and declared, "Even so, your greatest mistake was daring to face me. This is exactly what it means to catch bandits bare-handed." Aster's eyes blazed with killing intent, and he growled, "For that habit of meddling in other people's business, you will pay the price." Gurion retreated in panic, trembling as he cursed Aster as a monster. Ignoring the distance before him, Aster stomped hard on the ground. Using his foot as a pivot, he shot into the air like a blazing red arrow. Witnessing that unbelievable scene, Gurion screamed in terror. "Impossible, is he flying straight here?" In the blink of an eye, Aster was already close, his cold breath brushing before his opponent's face. "You are too slow." A heavy blow came crashing down, leaving Gurion breathless, able only to let out a pained groan. At that very moment, the memory of the first time he flew in the body of an infant suddenly flooded Aster's mind. He clearly felt the nearly limitless power when he mastered it himself. Magic and the wondrous feeling those wings brought him. Aster grabbed Gurion by the collar and slammed him hard into the solid stone wall. He looked at the enemy, trembling and begging him to stop. Aster calmly realized that the wall, which had once seemed magnificent, was now far too fragile before his strength. He has unlocked another layer of his power again. But to me right now, it is pitifully small. Aster curled his lips in contempt. Violent magical explosion suddenly erupted. The examinees standing below were all stunned. They did not understand what was happening, trembling as they wondered in terror. What kind of fighting is that? What is wrong with those two? Amid the thick smoke and dust, Aster's figure strode imposingly out of the ruined gate. He coldly dragged the exhausted Gurion, who no longer had the ability to resist, like a broken object, his empty gaze fixed straight ahead. Aster walked through the deathly still crowd without even bothering to glance at them. He decisively let go, throwing the defeated man onto the cold ground. Gurion could only wheeze in pain. It hurts. You should have taken a few more hits. When you bullied others, why did you not cry out?" Even after his crushing defeat, Gurion still used the last of his strength to order the people around him. "What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and charge in to deal with him for me." He screamed madly, using his family name to threaten them. "This is an order from a member of the Elmham family." Under that pressure, Smith rushed over in panic to pick up the sword on the ground, cursing nonstop in terror. "Damn it." Seeing through the weakness of the people before him, Aster asked coldly, "Are you that afraid of Elmham's revenge?" That question seemed to touch a hidden wound, making Smith erupt in resentment. "Of course I am afraid. My Smith family is only a third-rank noble house. One light breath from them would be enough to make us disappear." He shouted about the cruelty of this world, where lowly nobles were forced to bow their heads and obey, not daring to defy those above them just to survive. Smith looked at Aster with hatred and shouted loudly, "How could someone like you, who has everything in your hands, understand our fear?" Aster silently looked at the trembling man, his deep eyes devoid of emotion. Then he faintly revealed a mysterious smile. That left Smith stunned, and he immediately pressed him, "What are you laughing at?" In his heart, Aster suddenly remembered what Kudo's older sister had once said. You could never understand how those with nothing feel. Though he knew he stood in a privileged position, Aster still believed that precisely because of that, there were things only he could do. Pointing the broken blade toward the wretched Gurion on the ground, he declared in a ringing voice, "My enemy is Elmheim. If you cannot do it, I will change everything myself. One day, the Elmheim family will be overthrown as well." Aster's voice resounded through the arena. "That arrogant and overbearing Elmheim family, I will crush it with my own hands." The surrounding examinees were dumbstruck, unable to believe it. Smith trembled as he asked whether he understood what he was saying. Aster looked straight ahead and coldly answered that this was a declaration of war. He warned that blind loyalty to Elmheim would only lead to betrayal and a miserable end. If they wanted to avoid that, they had to rise and fight. "The 7 wings on my back are the power to do exactly that," Aster declared in a ringing voice. He gave the crowd their final choice, so choose, will you follow that man, or follow me and stand against Elmheim? Gurion screamed madly, threatening to remember every person who dared betray him, making the third-rate nobles fear the consequences to come. Smith gritted his teeth, his heart tearing violently, then choked out in resentment. Damn it. Damn it all. Whichever path they took now was like charging straight into death. This situation truly made things difficult for them. In the end, Smith decisively took the blue flag and rushed straight toward Aster. He staked everything on one question. You are certain you can defeat him, aren't you? If you only give us false hope and fail to change anything in the end, I will despise you. Faced with that question, Aster answered with a firm promise, very well, I promise. Smith mustered all his courage and shouted, I vigor. The eldest son of the Smith family, from this moment on, officially support Aster F. Elmheim. Smith's action left all the surrounding examinees. That shock made them realize that Gurion's plan had completely collapsed. Under everyone's astonished gaze, Aster coldly brought the sword tip close to his opponent's neck, officially deciding victory in this round. Smith shouted, shattering the silent atmosphere, what are you all still standing there for? This is the time to show those arrogant Elmheims what we are made of. Place your bets on the 7 wings. That resolute rallying cry made the other examinees begin to waver. They looked at one another, stunned by the change that had come far too suddenly. Looking at that scene, Aster faintly curled his lips and thought, so someone has opened the way. At least now I no longer have to plant the flags myself. Reeling in this big catch is worth a sigh of relief. Even so, his gaze remained pensive. This is still not enough. I need more allies to completely overthrow the Elmheim family. On the other side, Gurion was still kneeling on the ground in humiliation. A worried subordinate ran over and asked, are you all right, Lord Gurion? He immediately flung that person's hand away and roared, do not touch me, useless trash. Eruption of rage twisted Gurion's face into something terrifying. He gritted his teeth in hatred. You say you want to overthrow the Elmheim family. You low-born wretches of the branch line. If I let him run wild like this, how could I ever face those of the main family again? He looked at his blood-stained hand, his will for revenge burning madly. I am not like my older brother. I cannot let everything end here. Just then, a cold voice rang out, what happened, Elmheim? We have only been apart for a short while, yet you already look this wretched. Gurion raised his head in shock and realized Nolan was standing imposingly before him. As if he had found a savior, he shouted in resentment, what the hell have you been doing all this time? Wasn't dealing with him your task. You lost miserably and now you still want to cast blame. I wonder if he can find a shield for himself. Looking at Nolan's solid back, Gurion secretly felt triumphant. That's right, we still have this man on our side. Though his emblem was not the 7 wings, in terms of swordsmanship alone, he was certainly the strongest person here. He stood up, pointed straight at Aster, and ordered, hurry, take that guy down for me. However, Nolan kept his expressionless face and calmly said, I came to return this. He coldly declared the end of his relationship with that despicable man. As expected, your methods run contrary to my knightly spirit. From today onward, the alliance between us officially ends here. Nolan decisively turned and left, leaving Gurion frozen in utter bewilderment. Nolan's sudden reversal made the remaining examinees even more confused. They stood lost on the battlefield, not knowing whom to trust or follow. Nolan coldly advanced toward Aster, declaring that there was no room for avoidance in this exam. Do not tell me you think you can pass without deciding victory or defeat against me. He wanted to use the proud swordsmanship of the Nolan family to measure the strength of Aster's 7 wings. This guy really is tough, but whether he can defeat him is the real question. Nolan put all his mana into his sword, creating a brilliant golden radiance before charging forward at astonishing speed. He roared with resolve, let us make it clear right now, which side is truly stronger. Contrary to that impatience, Aster merely curled his lips faintly and answered mysteriously, no, that comes later. In an instant, crimson men erupted violently. Aster easily stopped Nolan's thunderous slash, creating a collision filled with overwhelming force. Nolan was shocked to realize that Aster now was entirely different from the man he had faced moments ago. That overwhelming pressure left him breathless. This guy, he is nothing like before. Nolan refused to accept any delay. He repeated the Academy's harsh rule, only one team was allowed to pass this exam. He shouted, demanding a decisive duel. They had to decide victory and defeat at once, to determine who was truly qualified to become a royal knight. Aster calmly closed his eyes, admitting that it would be a major problem if he were forced to eliminate a talented person. He left Nolan stunned as he declared frankly, Nolan, I also want you to become a royal knight. Aster explained that after calling on everyone to defeat the Elmheim family, letting an ally give up simply because they were on a different team would be far too terrible. The smile full of confidence and hidden calculation, Aster firmly asserted, I already have a plan for everyone here to pass. If we can all get through together, why exhaust ourselves fighting over it? Nolan and the other examinees were so shocked that they could not speak. They could not believe their ears at the bold idea Aster had just spoken aloud. Standing amid the ruins, Aster affirmed that although he was not absolutely certain, he was still very confident if everyone was willing to cooperate. He looked down at Gurion, who was kneeling there wretchedly, then began the first step to overturn the entire situation. Aster held out his hand before the man who had just tried to kill him and said coldly, let us make peace, Gurion. Immediately after that, the stronghold witnessed an unprecedented sight. The three silk bands of the blue, red, and yellow teams were tied tightly together and fluttered at the top. Seeing that rare scene, the examiner roared in fury, cursing the candidates for not even knowing how to plant a flag properly. Aster calmly replied that the rules only required occupying 2 bases or more, and never forbade several teams from planting their flags at the same stronghold. Therefore, all 3 teams decided to form an alliance and occupy every base together. Aster exploited the loophole so smoothly that the examiner was left speechless with rage. The examiner flushed purple and shouted that Aster was looking down on the exam, then questioned why he would join hands with the enemy instead of eliminating them. That man roared that knights had to be the sword of the nation, then issued a threat. He would fail every candidate present here because of this ridiculous act. Aster did not waver at all and asked in return whether he intended to abuse his authority to eliminate people who had not broken the rules. He stepped closer and whispered a weighty warning. If everyone was failed unfairly, would the Elmheim family truly let it go? The threat struck directly at the examiner's weak point, leaving that man silent, even though he was furious to the extreme. The entire group was taken into a sealed room and had to stand waiting for a full hour in a tense atmosphere. Smith was restless and afraid that everyone would be quietly failed after the reckless move just now. Contrary to his teammates' unease, Aster remained composed. He believed that at the very least, this action proved the matter was worth discussing. Besides, if they failed the whole group, who would the instructors even teach? Seeing that Gurion had finally agreed to cooperate, Smith curiously asked Aster what he had said to make that arrogant young master submit. But all he received in response was a mysterious smile. Suddenly, the great doors swung open. A solemn night demanded everyone's attention. Tension, because Headmaster Mimir was about to announce the exam results. An elderly man with a dignified bearing stepped in and asked everyone to listen very carefully to what he was about to say. Looking at the middle-aged man approaching, Aster wondered inwardly if that was the headmaster. Seeing his rather plain appearance, he casually remarked that he looked just like any ordinary old man. That disrespectful remark immediately made the person beside him remind him that he was being far too rude. Mimir stopped, looked straight at Aster, and asked whether he was Aster. He admitted that his actions had forced the council to make a very difficult decision, because accepting too many candidates at once was something without precedent. Mimir revealed that at first there had been a proposal to hold a retest, but thanks to the support of the other directors, the academy had ultimately decided to accept Aster's argument. Under the boy's doubtful gaze, as if he wanted to ask what that meant, Mimir suddenly smiled brightly and announced in a clear voice, "All of you have passed. This is truly one of the happiest pieces of news in our students' lives." The entire room instantly erupted with joyful cheers. Smith and the other candidates could not hide their delight at officially becoming students. Mimir reminded everyone to keep striving so they could prove that the Academy's decision today was completely correct. He solemnly offered his congratulations and warmly welcomed all the new recruits to the Dorazing Kingdom Knight Academy. Relieved cheers rang out through the night, marking a new beginning for Aster's journey in this place. After the miracle in the selection round, Aster and the other candidates enjoyed a rare moment of relaxation in the Academy's enormous hot bath. Smith soaked in the water and happily exclaimed that this was the real life. Good food, and the bath was spacious too. All of it was thanks to Lord Aster. The other candidates also excitedly chimed in, even declaring that they would follow Boss Aster for the rest of their lives. Aster simply sank quietly into warm water. He thought inwardly that the most important thing was that they had dared to stand up against Elmheim's people and had officially become knight candidates. He believed this momentum would eventually become a great wave, strong enough to overthrow the Elmheim family, and this was the starting point of his rebellion. Aster also thought of his older sister Anne Finn, who had enrolled a year earlier and would surely help him understand the situation here before tomorrow's training. Just as he was about to stand up and prepare to get used to his new life at the academy, Aster suddenly felt something very strange right behind his back. He froze and turned around, then cried out in panic when he saw the candidates gathered in a dense crowd, staring intently at the mark on his back with worshipful expressions. "What the hell are you people doing?" It turned out that these people believed the living 7-winged mark was an extremely effective good luck charm, so they took the chance to gather around and borrow its fortune. We were rather concerned about this as well. Despite Aster's angry resistance, the candidates still clasped their hands together in sincere prayer, asking the gods for protection. Aster could only roar helplessly at the absurdity of his new teammates, insisting that such luck would never happen. In another hidden corner of the castle, a mysterious woman stood on the balcony, coldly reprimanding Gurion as he knelt flat at her feet. She sneered that instead of taking down the 7-winged child, he had been subdued and had returned empty-handed. Helen Elmheim glared at Gurion, who was kneeling at her feet. She snarled in fury that he had even allowed Aster to declare that he would crush Elmheim, yet he had only stood by and watched in shame. Gurion trembled and begged in fear, "I am sorry. I will definitely make up for this mistake. Next time I will not fail mother's expectations. But a vicious kick cut off his words. Helen coldly declared that there would be no next time for a useless thing like him. People said even a fierce tiger would not devour its cub, but this woman was perhaps a demon wearing a human skin. Was she even human? She continued to hurl bitter insults at that man, useless and filthy like him, deserving to be thrown away with the trash. Just then Lillian A. Elmham appeared, calmly stepping forward and treating on the man, who was barely breathing, then said coldly that he was no different from the weak Dallas. Gurion groaned in pain, trying to cling to his final sliver of hope as he begged his sister not to do this. But the only response he received was merciless cruelty from his own blood sister. Lying flattened on the ground with his face covered in filth, Gurion gritted his teeth in despairing hatred. Damn it, this was all his fault. It was all caused by him. He dumped all the blame onto Aster, the one who had pushed him into this miserable state. Suddenly Aster's calculating offer during the exam resurfaced in his mind: cooperate with Taddy Gurion. Returning empty-handed like this would be very bad, would it not? Indeed, now he was no different from a cheap piece of trash in the household. Faced with Gurion's viciousness, Aster mocked the scene of him having to report to his family that he had been tricked during the exam by someone regarded as trash within the clan. Seeing Gurion turn pale with terror, he continued to dig deeper into his panic. I saw Dallas's end. Truly pathetic. That was not a death fit for a human being. Aster gripped Gurion tightly by the collar, forcing him to look straight at the cruel truth before him. Aster coldly planted even more fear in Gurion's mind. You surely do not want to end up like him, do you? All you need to do is stay silent and ignore everything I am doing. Do that and I will save you. Back in the present, Lillian was still unleashing one ruthless kick after another, till an unexpected voice suddenly rang out. Stop. Spare him, Lillian. That is enough. The one who spoke was Julius A. Elmheim. He sat there calmly speaking in a mocking tone. Your adorable little brother is crying and apologizing, is he not? Gurion could only sob in agony. Ugh, big brother. Julius laughed arrogantly, his hand clenching Anfin's head, who was being restrained by the iron mask, then continued with false righteousness. We are family, bound by the same blood. Family should get along, should they not, Anfin? The image of the Elmheim family's absolute dominance, which had held the knights back for so long, now began to tremble because of the appearance of the seven-colored one. Before the symbol of the family's authority, Lady Helen turned back coldly, her eyes flashing with cruelty. She gave her two children a decisive order. Therefore, you two must remind them. Lillian wore a twisted, combative smile, her violet eyes blazing brightly with excitement, that we are not merely decorations. Continuing after his younger sister, Julius also wore a sinister smile, his crimson eyes filled with killing intent. He boldly declared his brutal goal: show them what true violence is. You are honored knights of the kingdom, or more precisely, candidates chosen for that position. In the training ground with towering pillars, countless examinees were training madly and serve a chance to change their lives. A true knight of the kingdom must be an elite who excels in combat, tactics, and every other field. Therefore, if you truly wish to step into their ranks, you yourselves, you must prove that you are exceptional. And once you are exceptional, there is only one path. So, everyone do your best. Smith roared with full spirit, but at that very moment, the instant the blade touched the pillar, it shattered at once. The fragments shot out, leaving him stunned as he blurted out, "Damn it." To classify talent, the Academy divided candidates into 6 ranks, corresponding to a training program suited to each person's actual strength. The stronger was, the more chances one had to access more advanced and refined techniques. If you only know how to swing a sword, you are only ranked 3. If you can control mana only, then are you considered rank 2. Only when you master both swordsmanship and magic at the same time do candidates truly step into the ranks of first class. Blazing red murderous aura enveloped the space, accompanied by a steely declaration: I have nothing to teach ordinary trash below rank 3. If you want to learn first-class techniques, then become stronger. Continuing to prove your strength is the only freedom you have here. A thunderous impact rang out, making the examiner turn around in alarm. Aster stood towering there, still holding his sword. It turned out he had just sliced through the pillar as easily as cutting a banana. The examinees behind him could only lament in despair. How are we supposed to do something like that? From the high balcony above, countless astonished gazes turned downward at once. The academy director carefully observed that young man. They silently wondered whether this was the rumored seven-colored one, someone who possessed such extraordinary talent. Easily destroying the magical iron pillar, a material as hard as a golem, proved that Aster was truly exceptional. However, the potential hidden within the seven-colored wings did not stop there. One director thoughtfully judged that if Aster became satisfied with himself too soon, He would surely be devoured by the dragon lying in wait. That was Julius Elmheim, the one sitting arrogantly with a sinister smile, ready to crush anyone who stood in his way with brutal power. Standing by the corridor window, Smith sighed as he looked at the score ranking board. Although they had passed the harsh selection exam, they still had to endure the merciless trial stage of the talent prioritization system. Looking at the card in his hand, Smith bitterly realized that among the recruits, only Astor and Nolan did not have to start from the lowest rank 6. The gap in class was made clear at once when Astor was placed straight into rank 4, while everyone else was still struggling and falling behind. Astor held the rank 4 card, smiled brightly, and reminded everyone that to become a Knight of the Kingdom, they had to reach at least rank 2. He urged Smith to catch up to him quickly unless he wanted serious trouble. Smith complained about how strict his big brother was, causing Astor to pause. He could not help asking in confusion, "Big brother?" Smith seriously repeated the declaration from before. Astor's declaration that he would crush the Elmheim family had ignited hope. That hope was for the many people longing for a real change in this reality. He excitedly put an arm around Astor's shoulders, then declared loudly, "So let us support you, big brother. Let us overthrow Elmheim together. You have a name in the academy now too, big brother." Astor became even more determined to grow stronger in order to accomplish his one and only goal, crushing the Elmheim family. While he was still lost in thought, his growling stomach suddenly dragged him back to reality. Smith immediately pulled him away to find food. "Anyway, we need to fill our stomachs first. I cannot endure the afternoon training session on a completely empty stomach." As soon as they reached the Great Hall, they were surprised to see the recruits gathered in a dense crowd with uneasy expressions. Astor asked in confusion what was going on and why everyone was standing here. Seeing him appear, the recruits cried out in panic, "Astor is here, something big has happened. Elmheim's people are here." From inside, a strange mocking voice rang out, "Ho, so you are Astor." A young man leisurely chewing bread looked at Astor provocatively. "Since you came too late, I ate this food first, brother." Astor froze when he recognized Julius, and Lillian was also sitting arrogantly in front, while Julius calmly rested his foot on a pitiful person lying flat on the floor. Smith asked in shock, "Brother, then that man also belongs to the main family?" Astor confirmed in a low voice, "Yes, they breed well, as many as ants. That is Julius Elmheim, the second son, and also the second in the line of succession of the main family, accompanied by his younger sister, Lillian. Those tyrant siblings were infamous as the cruelest in the Elmheim family. Wherever they went, only terror and ruin remained." Astor silently blamed himself for forgetting the existence of those two. Now, both of those dangerous figures were inside the academy. Lillian looked at Astor with amusement in her eyes. "Hey, your face is rather cute too." She calmly stepped over the body groaning on the floor and spoke in a mocking voice, completely unlike the stupid, ugly, and boring little brother lying here. Seeing the bizarre iron mask on the defeated one's face, Smith King asked in alarm what that tasteless thing was. Astor explained coldly that it was an iron shackle, a disciplinary tool of House Elmheim used to punish those who fell behind. In his previous life, he too had once been a victim tormented by that thing. Julius sneered, stomped hard on Gurion's head, and insulted him, saying that even though he bore the Elmheim name, he was still ranked a lowly 6 today. Julius looked down at the younger brother groaning beneath his feet, his lips curling in contempt. "Truly pathetic, is it not?" That man smiled provocatively and declared that this iron mask was a gift from a kind older brother, meant to give Gurion more motivation to strive harder. Looking at the long line of students wearing that dreadful disciplinary tool, Julius said calmly that food, water, and fresh air had become rewards, because if they could not remove it, they would not survive. Witnessing that scene, Smith shuddered in horror. What the hell was happening? All of them were wearing that thing. Julius smugly pointed toward those bound in shackles, saying their eyes, like starving beasts, were proof of the mask's effectiveness. That man even demanded the rookies greet their seniors properly. Suddenly, Julius turned toward a figure behind him and urged her on. "Come now, you do it too. Do not be shy anymore, let everyone see your face." That man smiled sinisterly as a red-haired girl stepped forward. "It has been a long time since you all reunited, has it not?" Astor froze, his pupils shrinking as he recognized that person. The one standing before him was his own older sister, wearing a cold iron mask. Julius asked with delight, "Your sister has changed quite a lot, has she not?" Astor cried out in agony, "Sister Anfin." Dear heavens, even his older sister had been dragged here by them as a pawn. Anfil trembled, her eyes filled with resentment hidden behind the cold mask. The flames of fury within Astor erupted more violently than ever before, his hand clenched tightly around the sword hilt, killing intent surging wildly. Astor roared in utter rage, "Julius, you bastard, what have you done to her?" Before that fury, Julius still calmly tossed another iron mask onto the floor, letting the dry clang of metal ring out like a provocation. Julius smiled faintly, pretending to be composed. "Calm down. That man said he had prepared enough masks for every newcomer, with not a single one missing. Looking at the pile of iron masks scattered at his feet, Julius arrogantly stepped on Gurion and spread both arms wide. That man wore a twisted smile filled with excitement and loudly declared that they should all enjoy a truly cheerful welcome party together. Julius roared an order at his lackeys. "Come on, you bastards, focus on recruitment already. This lot will be your juniors in the Iron Shackle Squad." That man laughed madly, declaring that if they wanted a proper dinner, they had to make every rookie here wear a mask. In an instant, the masked seniors rushed in to attack. Aster realized the situation was extremely bad when their eyes were lifeless and they had lost all reason. With the strength of students who were at least rank 4, this relentless assault caught Aster off guard. House Elmheim had moved far too early, and even held an overwhelming numerical advantage. They had struck him down preemptively from the very start. If he hesitated any longer, many people would likely collapse. Seeing his companions fall one after another, Smith shouted in panic, "What should we do, boss? At this rate, everyone will be turned into masked lackeys." In that life-or-death moment, Aster decisively swung a blazing crimson slash, creating a burst of magical power that blasted away all the seniors closing in on him. Pained groans rang out as the masked figures were knocked far back. Aster's icy eyes drilled straight into the mastermind. Smith was stunned by the terrifying pressure radiating from him. Aster stepped forward, looked at the ringleader, and asked through gritted teeth, "Cousin Julius, what the hell do you think you are doing?" Julius answered in a mocking voice, telling Aster not to be so harsh because he believed this was a decent act. That man contemptuously called the rookies following Aster scum, people who only knew how to cling to others to pass the exam and then delude themselves about the candidate position. Sitting arrogantly on a high chair beside Lillian, Julius declared that if those at the bottom were too pathetic, someone at the peak like him would also be looked down on. This rabble thinks far too highly of themselves, and if this continues, everything will be ruined. As the one standing at the top, that man asserted that he could not allow half measures to exist, so he would personally temper them all in the style of House Elmheim. Holding the iron mask in his hand, Julius wore a cruel, distorted smile and stepped on the head of a student groaning on the ground. In the face of those arrogant words, Aster only replied coldly that he had not asked, nor did he care about anything that man had just said. Aster roared in fury, demanding that Julius immediately remove that disgusting thing from his sister's mouth. He poured blazing crimson magical power into his sword. Aster charged forward to attack Julius, but was unexpectedly blocked by Anfin herself as she swung her sword. Seeing his sister step out to protect the enemy, Aster froze, unable to believe his eyes. Anfin looked at her younger brother with cold, empty eyes from behind the iron mask. Julius stood calmly behind her, mocking Aster and telling him not to vent his anger on him, because Anfin staying by his side was entirely voluntary. That man challenged Aster to ask his sister himself. Meanwhile, Lillian laughed with delight at her older brother's cruelty. Aster painfully understood why his mother had always been worried after receiving no news from Anfin for so long. It turned out his sister had been suffering this wretched fate. He resolved to save her from their manipulation, shouting that she no longer needed to obey them. Yet what answered that kindness was a cold slash from Anfin. Right as Aster was still hesitating, Nolan suddenly rushed forward, shouting loudly as he asked how long he intended to hesitate. Nolan declared that if Aster could not make a move, he would take down that bastard Julius himself, then charge straight toward the ringleader. He scorned the so-called hero's lack of qualification. Julius loudly demanded that he draw his sword and taste defeat. He wanted the technique of the Nolan family to be carved deep into the other man's soul, but Julius was on another level entirely, catching the blade with his bare hand before sneering in contempt. So simply training harder with a sword than others is enough to be called a great knight. He was instantly stunned when he realized the terrifying pressure radiating from that man. The blazing mana surrounding Julius made Nolan choke from the heat. This mana, could it be given off heat? Julius laughed arrogantly, then loudly declared the philosophy of the strong. Only the strongest have the greatest value. Immediately after, he unleashed a thunderous kick, sending Nolan flying before he collapsed in agony. Seeing his teammate in danger, Smith rushed over in panic. "Hey, are you alright, Nolan? It hurts like hell, obviously. What kind of question is that?" Julius looked at that miserable sight with delight. He admitted that he enjoyed trampling on the pride and dignity of those who always acted noble. Lillian calmly approached with the iron mask in hand, wearing a twisted smile as she intended to turn Nolan into her own special pet. She contemptuously shoved Smith aside and said coldly that weakness was also a sin. Julius gleefully agreed, asserting that only the strong had the right to speak. Meanwhile, the surrounding scene descended into chaos as the other students were forced one after another to wear iron masks amid desperate screams. "Please set us free. Please stop." Julius looked straight at Aster, challenging him over where he could go when everything was gradually being swallowed by someone stronger. Aster remained silent, his eyes flashing with a cold, sharp gleam. Julius still smirked provocatively. "What now, brother? In the next instant, Aster roared and rushed forward like a blazing red whirlwind. A violent magical collision erupted as Aster poured all his strength into the slash, but that attack still could not pierce Julius's mana shield. Even though he tried to pour in all his strength, the result did not change at all. He immediately reached out and seized Aster tightly by the throat. The dreadful heat made Aster endure intense pain. Witnessing his big brother's fury, Smith could only call Aster's name in panic and shock. Yet Julius still kept his arrogant, contemptuous expression and said, "Is this all the 7 colors can do? Truly disappointing. I thought you would be more useful." He reminded Aster that he had only blocked one of his attacks, so he should not get smug too soon. In response, Aster's eyes blazed within the flames. He suddenly twisted his body, creating a powerful vortex of blazing crimson mana. Julius was stunned as he realized something was wrong. His own mana had been caught and turned according to his opponent's will. The mana flow was compressed tightly, then suddenly erupted violently. It blasted Julius far away, while also crushing the sturdy stone walls into countless fragments. Amid the ruins, Aster calmly sheathed his sword and replied coldly, "Were you mumbling something just now? Sorry, I could not be bothered to listen. How about now, done mumbling yet?" He had been buzzing like a hornet this whole time. Aster stepped toward the defeated man, his sword still radiating threatening killing intent. Facing Julius, who was lying there in a miserable state, Aster challenged him in a low voice. "Why not repeat what you said earlier, cousin?" Recalling the insult that trash should know to keep their mouths shut, Aster looked straight at him and asked, "Was that what you said?" Looking at the devastated scene before them, everyone who witnessed it fell silent. They cried out in astonishment. That bastard actually did it. Amid the ruined scene, Aster stood there quietly. What can those who only know how to crow early even do? His gaze did not waver in the slightest. Julius struggled to crawl back up, dusting himself off while frowning in irritation. That hurt all over. You really did blow me quite far away, nephew. Still not afraid and still daring to challenge me. What are you gonna do if you scratch my precious mark?" Seeing Julius still standing after that terrifying attack, Smith trembled in disbelief. That man is completely unharmed. Contrary to the crowd's fear, Lillian was extremely excited. Things are about to get interesting. My brother is truly angry now. She did not hesitate to mock her brother sharply. "You are so weak, brother. After all that boasting, you got countered this miserably." Julius remained carefree, calmly replying to his sister's teasing. Hey, do not say it so bluntly, Lillian. A man like me can get hurt too." He silently looked down at the shattered sword beneath his feet. Killing intent rose again along with a chilling threat aimed straight at Aster. "You are bold indeed to dare do that," Julius roared, his pride wounded. "Aster, you dare call me trash?" He released scorching mana, as if intending to burn everything around him. Seeing Aster remain calm, Julius gritted his teeth and sneered. "You have grown far too arrogant, just because I played along with your little family game." He lowered his voice in threat. "I hope you are ready to feel death." Julius roared and charged forward wildly. Yet Aster remained indifferent, swinging his blazing red sword and answering coldly, "Oh, is that so? Enough with those long-winded threats. If you want to fight, then come at me." Julius poured all his power into a slash wrapped in a colossal flame, determined to crush his opponent. Aster immediately slipped aside to dodge, his eyes still calmly observing every movement of the enemy. Just as the two were about to unleash their decisive attacks, a dignified voice suddenly rang out to intervene. "No, that is enough, both of you." Aster started as he recognized that familiar voice. Count Mace. Count Mace appeared with an elegant bearing and a leisurely smile on his lips. He looked at the ruins around him and sighed softly. "What do you think the dining hall is for? It gives me a headache when you keep causing chaos like this. Good heavens, you have turned this place into a battlefield." Count Mace calmly stepped forward, unable to keep watching the devastation. Julius roared angrily, telling Mace not to interfere. He contemptuously called him the sixth family head's lackey, saying he had no right to meddle in his affairs. Mace still kept his leisurely smile and advised Julius to restrain himself. He mocked him, saying that a first-class student, of all people, the leading candidate at that, yet he was quibbling and losing his temper with someone regarded as lower rank. How disgraceful. To ease the situation, Mace approached Aster and gently asked him to show him some respect and put away his sword. Julius snorted coldly, his defiant gaze fixed straight on Mace. He growled that Mace did not understand how much trouble he had caused, but in the end, he still decided to let it pass this time. Julius swung his sword decisively, ordered his subordinates to withdraw, and declared that the welcome party ended here. Seeing the enemy about to leave before Sister Anne's matter had been resolved, Aster immediately wanted to chase after him and shouted for that man to stop. But Mace quickly closed in, held Aster firmly back, and immediately stopped him from doing something reckless. Count Mace lightly squeezed Aster's shoulder, quietly advising that he hoped he would give him face this time. Resentment boiled fiercely in his heart. Aster could only stand frozen, powerless as he watched Sister Anne's back. She was silently walking behind the tyrant Julius. Deep in his heart, Aster cried out to his sister in pain. Anfin glanced back slightly, her clouded eyes behind the iron mask seeming to hold so many words, yet she could not speak. Aster stood motionless and watched, his heart choking when he saw his sister completely manipulated by the enemy's shackles. Beneath his feet, the cold iron mask lay alone on the ground, like proof of the humiliation his sister had suffered. Sister Anfin, Aster silently called her name in overwhelming anguish. After that, the scene shifted to an office, where Viscount Hayfried angrily slammed the table. Before the main family's tyranny, he could not hide his helplessness. Nolan, the genius of the Nolan house, now lay unconscious, his entire body wrapped in white bandages after his miserable defeat. Not only that, many other comrades had also been mocked by Lillian, then dragged away with those bizarre masks. Seeing Aster grip the iron mask tightly, his eyes filled with killing intent, Smith worriedly asked what they should do next. Aster stood tall, his hand gripping the cold mask, his gaze pinned on the man before him as he questioned Count Mace. The silence was broken by the female assistant's angry shout, demanding that Aster show respect to the Count, but Mace calmly raised a hand to reassure her. Mace still kept his refined smile, gently saying it was fine, because he and this boy were old acquaintances. Looking at Mace's calm and unmoved face, memories suddenly surged back within Aster. 4 years ago, when Aster was summoned to the Elmheim main house, Mace had been the only noble from the Knight faction to step forward and protect him. But Aster had not even had time to wait for Mace's reaction. The person sitting beside him had already erupted in resentment, shouting that even if they were Elmheim people, Mace could not simply stand by and watch such brutality. Mace only gave a meaningful sneer, then calmly said that he was also a high-ranking official of Elmheim, so it was not easy to question the main family. Aster raised the iron mask, his eyes blazing with anger, asking whether forcing others to wear it still did not count as a serious matter. Mace calmly leaned back in his chair, coldly saying that this academy had always trained knights under a system that valued talent above all. He believed that even if the method was cruel, if it helped candidates improve, there was no reason to oppose it. The students under Julius also raised their scores very quickly. Aster bitterly understood that in this rotten place, he could not rely on anyone. Seeing that Aster intended to leave, Mace warned him not to recklessly charge straight into enemy territory to bring everyone back. Mace's gaze bored deep into Aster, reminding him that every action of his was being watched closely by the main family. As long as he made one careless step, they could drive him out of the academy at any time. Aster still walked away decisively, coldly saying that threat was not enough to make him abandon his comrades. Looking at the iron mask in his hand, Aster silently understood that his actions did not come only from righteousness. He knew all too well that those shackles would gnaw away at and rot a person's soul. It stole freedom, voice, and even the most basic dignity of a warrior. In the end, it strangled the will to resist, turning a person into a soulless tool of obedience. That was the true horror. Seeing Aster's hardened expression, Mace narrowed his eyes slightly, suspicious, because he spoke as though he had witnessed it firsthand. Aster only curled his lips, his gaze darkening, saying he had once known the fate of those who were too late to save. Aster's firm declaration made both Smith and Mace fall silent in thought. Mace looked deep into the eyes of the young man before him, a doubt rising in his heart that was hard to put into words. Seeing the atmosphere grow too heavy, Aster softened his tone slightly to reassure Mace that he did not need to worry too much. He also had no interest in being expelled. If it could be resolved peacefully, that would still be the best choice. Seeing that confident bearing, Mace asked curiously, "So you really do have a plan?" Aster did not turn back, only raised the iron mask in his hand and answered coldly, "Surely you understand by now. This is my own way of fighting," Aster said, then decisively tightened his grip on the mask. 3 days after the cafeteria disturbance, the academy became more suffocating than ever, as the students trained to exhaustion under invisible pressure. Seeing Nolan still come to the field with his face wrapped in bandages, Smith asked worriedly whether he was truly well enough to train. Nolan firmly brushed it off, his gaze still resolute despite the pain in his body, saying now was not the time to rest. The Rank 4 program was about to begin, and these wounds were only minor. Smith could only sigh at that stubbornness. Smith's gaze quickly shifted shock when he looked ahead, realizing the one more worrying was Aster. Looking at Aster's back, Smith wondered in horror what he was thinking, because at that moment, Aster was wearing Elmheim's iron mask. Just a few days earlier, Aster had silently gone straight into enemy territory in a tight black outfit. Seeing him appear, Julius sprawled lazily on the sofa, a bottle of wine in his hand, cruelly mocking that he was truly bold. Julius reminded him that he still had not forgiven what happened the other day, then asked Aster contemptuously what right he had to come here and discuss a deal. Standing amid a ring of sharp blades, Aster remained strangely calm, looking straight at the enemy and declaring that he had come to bring his sister and comrades back. To achieve that, Aster made a proposal that left everyone present stunned. He pointed at the iron mask on the floor, coldly saying that in exchange, Julius could put iron shackles on him. Witnessing her younger brother's reckless decision, Enfin cried out in shock within her mind, "Aster, what are you thinking?" Aster continued striking at Julius's calculations, saying this was a chance for him to bind someone suspected of rebellion. Not a bad deal. After hearing that, Lillian burst into mocking laughter. Have you gone mad? Do you truly want to become someone else's pet? Or have you grown used to being tortured? Julius thoughtfully admitted that Aster was indeed an irritating thorn in the Elmheim family's side, but looking into those unwavering eyes, Julius could not help growing suspicious. He questioned him through gritted teeth. I do not think you are the type who only knows how to bow your head and obey. What exactly are you plotting? The only answer he received was Aster's unreadable silence amid the blades close to his neck. Julius was still full of doubt, but Aster only replied coldly, nothing at all. He looked at the iron mask on the ground and stated that it was locked by magic, and only they had the key. They could kill him whenever they wanted. Even so, Aster's gaze suddenly turned ice cold. He continued in a provocative tone, you truly lack confidence, cousin. Those words struck Julius's pride and drove him into a rage. Blazing magic wrapped around his body as he ground his teeth and thought inwardly. In this name, he finally declared decisively, fine, I accept that wager. Julius slammed the bottle of wine hard onto the table. He felt that since Aster had proposed it himself, merely switching positions would be far too dull. Looking at the people in chains, he put forward a cruel challenge. Not 7 days, but 10. 10 days wearing that thing, without a single drop of water or a single bite of food. If you are still alive by then, I will release all of them. Seeing her younger brother act so recklessly, Enfin could only scream and sob helplessly behind the iron mask. Stop it, Aster. You cannot do this. You are only destroying yourself. Surrounded by cold, sharp blades, he knelt down and calmly affirmed. Then the agreement is made. Aster understood better than anyone how iron chains could wear down a person's soul, because he had once been raised by the Elmheim house as a tool for a long time. Looking at his haggard older sister Enfin behind the mask, he painfully remembered the strong, stubborn sister from his memories. Though she was as fragile as anyone else, she had always been resilient and had never let others see her weakness. Yet now she merely stood there, unable to resist, looking at him with weak eyes behind the cold metal. Aster silently promised, do not worry, sister. I will definitely shatter these chains. When that happens, we will talk at ease. Lillian wore a sinister smile as the iron mask officially locked onto Aster's face, letting purple mana envelop him. Suddenly, a domineering shout rang out from afar. What the hell are you doing there? On the training ground, the students wearing iron masks lay exhausted on the ground. The overseer roared viciously. Who allowed you to rest? Heavy gasps sounded in resentment. Damn it, why do I have to suffer this? They bitterly realized that the demonic instructor did not care at all, even though they were being tormented by their chains. Under the scorching sun on the training ground, Smith panted with worry. At this rate, we will collapse before Aster can save us. Standing beside him, Nolan looked coldly at Gurion, who was kneeling flat on the ground, and sneered. For certain people among us, I would call that karma. Smith could only sigh and encourage everyone to endure while he was inwardly astonished that several days had passed, yet Aster still acted as if nothing had happened. Watching Aster's figure continue running tirelessly across the grounds, Nolan wondered whether the endurance of the seven-colored one had truly reached a monstrous level. An ordinary person could only survive 3 or 4 days without food or water, at most a week if lying still to conserve strength. But Aster was not merely starving himself. He was also filling those days with a mad intensity of training, constantly swinging his sword and engaging in fierce bouts. Even when he had to carry heavy logs across a rushing current, Aster still showed no sign of exhaustion. Nolan thought inwardly, this guy really is a monster, not even human anymore. A strange rumor began spreading among the students about his past. It said that before being adopted by the Viscount, that seven-colored child had once crawled alone for miles through a snowy night as an infant. That baby had crossed an entire mountain range buried in snow during a night storm. Smith could not help shuddering. If that was true, was his vitality not far too terrifying? Even so, he still suspected it was only a cheap rumor meant to show off his prestige. Amid the haze of smoke and suffocating pressure, Aster still walked slowly, his eyes blazing as red mana wrapped around his body. It is mealtime, sewer rats. Lillian walked arrogantly through the dark corridor. Following behind her were soldiers carrying trays of luxurious food, with only a snap of her fingers stained with purple magic. She ordered dinner to begin, wearing a look of contempt for those locked tightly in iron chains. The thing called a meal was actually only a piece of dry, hard cheese and a glass of water on a chipped plate. Looking at that miserable portion, Gurion completely broke down and muttered in despair. Again, is this all there is? I cannot take it anymore, at this rate I will die. Another person trembled as he knelt at her feet and begged, please, sister, give me some real food. Yet the only answer to that wretched plea was Lillian's cold stomp, crushing the piece of cheese against the filthy floor. She curled her lips in a vicious smile. Oh my, if you did not want to eat it, you should have said so from the start. Lillian casually reminded them that food should not be wasted. She looked toward the dark corner of the room and sneered, unlike you lot, there is a boy out there suffering far worse. In the distance, Aster sat slumped against the wall with the iron mask locked tightly in place, his body nearly exhausted after days of starvation in exchange for his companion's freedom. Seeing that scene, "Your little brother really is a saint, is he not?" Julius leisurely savored a bite of steak, then glanced at the dazed Anfin and mocked her. "Why not go over and cheer him on, Anfin?" He laughed at her helplessness. "Ah, but I suppose you no longer have the face to look at him. After all, he fell into this miserable state entirely because of you." Anfin could only grit her teeth and endure the torment, silently calling her younger brother's name, Aster. Looking at the lavish tray of food before her, she felt her throat tighten. While Aster was enduring hunger, thirst, and chains in exchange for everyone's freedom, she was sitting here under the enemy's protection. Anfin trembled and wondered to herself, "What should I do now?" Julius chewed his meat while narrowing his eyes at Aster, who sat slumped and motionless in the distance, suspicion rising in his heart. What exactly is happening? I thought he had to have some scheme or trick to escape from here. And yet all this time, he had not revealed even the slightest intention to resist. Looking at his lonely younger cousin's figure, Julius wondered whether Aster truly intended to endure the full 10 days with nothing but his mortal body. He wore a twisted smile full of excitement, determined to enjoy every moment of torment and see how long the pride of the seven-colored one could last against merciless hunger. Just when Julius was his most triumphant, behind the cold iron mask, Aster's eyes suddenly flashed with a mysterious light. "You will see,"